Chapter 626. Mounted Shooting. But her free-spirited nature might make her unsuitable for this position. Suspecting this, Fang Hao asked Rolina, are you sure you're okay with this? Rolina gave Fang Hao a plain look and softly replied, I'm fine. Oh, that's good. Rebecca also smiled and said, Rolina has shared several management experiences with me, she's completely capable of handling the city for a while. Don't worry. Yeah, of course I trust her. While Fang Hao said this, he wondered in his heart. She is knowledgeable, but whether she wants to manage is uncertain. Of course, they would only be gone for a short while and the city would operate according to the original plans, so there shouldn't be any problems. After chatting with Rebecca, Fang Hao began preparing for his traveling troupe. The 100 Lionheart Knights around a city were all carrying bolt-action rifles on their backs. And in their attributes list, a new skill, Mounted Shooting, was added. Mounted Shooting, this unit can skillfully shoot while riding. The accuracy decreases by 2% for each multiple of the mounted movement speed. It was clear that the Lionheart Knights had mastered the skill of using rifles while riding. What remained to be seen was the precision they displayed in actual combat. My lord, all the baggage is ready, we need some wagons to haul it, Aseti announced. Okay, I will prepare now. He opened the Book of Lords and looked for the blueprint for the dwarf wagon. Dwarf iron wagon, 400 hardened wood, 200 thick leather, 200 iron, 150 cast iron, 50 dwarf iron, 120 metal parts. Confirm production. 100-fold amplification triggered, obtained 101 dwarf iron wagons. One by one, the wagons lined up in the backyard. Compared with the merchant wagons they had before, the dwarf wagons were quite different. The overall height of the wagon is slightly shorter and it had an entire compartment. The compartment was made out of metal frameworks and wood, similar to a simplified version of a noble's carriage. The skeleton of the carriage was made from metal. This included the wheels and the base frame underneath the carriage. The wheels underneath even had a sophisticated gear design that made it much easier for the horses to pull the carriage along. Indeed, it was much better than an ordinary carriage. Aseti, Dimitrija, have your men load the supplies onto the wagons and make preparations as soon as possible, Fang Hao instructed. Yes, my lord, Dimitrija replied. He began to command his troops to load the supplies onto the wagons. What should we do? Angia asked from the side. Fang Hao glanced at her, then turned to Lori, who was curiously looking around. You take Lori, go sightseeing here, come back before we leave. Oh, good. Angia, taking Lori with her, dashed into the castle. The whole backyard was busy making final preparations. At this time, Rebecca came over again, and directly asked, What's with these wagons? What do you mean? Fang Hao asked back. They seem better than the ones we use. So that's what she was talking about. Fang Hao immediately explained, Indeed, they're better than ordinary wagons, the dwarf designed it to save the horse's energy when pulling, and it's considerably more robust. Oh, is that so? Rebecca's eyes lit up. She then walked back to her troop, clapping her hands and shouted, Everyone switch to these iron wagons, transfer all the supplies to them. At Rebecca's command, everyone started moving. Supplies that were already loaded onto the wooden wagons were being transferred to the iron wagons. Horses would be switched as well. The wagons initially prepared by Lyss City were all set aside. When all the preparations were done, Rebecca once again gave a few words of instruction to Rolina and Habert. The army set off, resplendently departing through the city's east gate, embarking on their journey towards Silver Wing City. The team advanced along the route, forming a long, thin line. In the front were Rebecca's carriages and escort troops, and Fang Hao's carriages were at the end of the line. Lionheart Knights surrounded them for protection. Among them, there were also contracted mercenary groups besides the troops of Lyss City and Fang Hao's Lionheart Knights. The Flame Mercenary Group, which Fang Hao had contact with previously, was one of them. The mercenary groups guarding the city lord had all undergone strict selection. They also had to fulfill the requirements for both strength and credit ratings at the task hall to be hired by the city lord. Similarly, being hired by the city lord was also a symbol of honor. It encapsulated the reliability and credibility of the mercenary group, attracting more employers to choose them in the future. The team walked from morning till dusk. It was quite peaceful along the way. While passing through an uninhabited area, there were only some wild beasts that followed from the forests. These beasts were quite self-aware. Seeing that the team was considerable in size and fully armed, they followed for a while at a distance before stopping, watching as the team moved on. Although the journey was smooth, they still needed to find a place to stay overnight. At this moment, a cavalryman approached from the front of the team. He said in a low voice, "My lord, Lady Rebecca said that there's a potential camp up ahead, possibly a city of a transmigrator. She asked if you could see if we could spend the night there." This was a barren land, they could camp outside, but needed to be wary of attacks from wild beasts. The beasts might cower during the day, but when night falls, and the team was exhausted, it would be easier for the beasts to attack. If there was a village or a camp, it would be much safer than camping outdoors. When scouting troops discovered a potentially transmigrated city, Rebecca's first thought were for Fang Hao to speak to them. Next, without waiting for Fang Hao to agree, the team began detoring from the main road towards the target city. After walking about 5 minutes, from the front came shouts and the sound of anguished roaring from bears. Chapter 627. In a dense forest, 5 militiamen armed with shields and spears are engaged in a fierce combat with a wild bear. This beast is a rank 3 warcraft, with a huge body and black fur. When it stands tall, it reaches a height of over 3 meters. With each swing of its large claws, a militiaman is sent flying. They tumble, completely disoriented. Luckily, the quality of their shields is quite good. It's just enough to leave them dazed after the hit. They shake their heads, stagger to their feet, seemingly not too severely wounded. The militiamen surround the bear, using their shields to block its attack and constantly jabbing their spears. Wound after wound is left on the bear's body. Despite its thick skin, they plan to slowly wear it down in this manner. Just when the militiamen believe they can win using this method, the wild bear lets out a roar of rage, its eyes blood red, and sends 4 militiamen flying with a sweep of its paw. The remaining militiaman, who did not get sent flying, is left alone to face the raging bear with his spear in hand. Roar! The bear roars in anger once more. It opens its massive jaws, aiming for the militiaman's head. Just as the militiaman stands still in terror, the bear on the verge of sinking its teeth into his head. Suddenly, a hurried footstep echoes from behind. It's getting closer. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of gunfire rings out. The bear, ready to bite down on his opponent, suddenly has multiple bloody holes blown open on its body. It screeches and then falls down stiffly. Blood drains onto the grass beneath the bear's carcass. Then, as they see a cavalryman donned in golden armor quickly approaching, the faces of the militiamen harden once more. If it were a wild bear, they could hunt it, suffering some injuries at worst. But facing such a well-equipped cavalier, they don't even have the chance to flee. The figure approaches rapidly. A cavalier, at the helm, mounted on a horse, looks down at the militiamen. "Just 5 of you." A female voice emanates from beneath the golden armor. A militiaman below swallows, his voice trembling slightly, just the 5 of us." The cavalier nods and gives an order to the others, "Take them all to the lord's residence." The cavalry in the back begins to move, leading the 5 men out of the forest. They reach a long line of soldiers approaching. When they approach the middle of the formation, they halt in front of a carriage. "My lord, we've brought the people, only 5 of them," the cavalier says respectfully. A crack forms as the curtain covering the carriage window lifts, revealing a young face. "Why are you here?" a voice comes from the carriage. The militiaman quickly answers, "We are here on the lord's orders, for hunting." This group of militiamen and their attire are quite familiar. At first glance, Fang Hao notices that from their armor to their shields and spears, everything is from his own merchandise sold on the channel. He's encountered a loyal customer. Fang Hao continues to inquire, "Who is your lord and what's his name?" "This." Upon hearing the question, the militiamen begin to hesitate. They nervously glance in the direction of the carriage window which emitted the voice, then quickly lower their heads. After exchanging glances, one of them whispers, My lords, we are soldiers under Lord Mahong, do let us know if we can be of any assistance." The militiamen are careful in their response, directly mentioning their lord's name. It's not that their loyalty towards their lord is not strong, but stating their affiliation can help them avoid being mistaken for the bandits these troops could then justifiably execute. Moreover, the banners their opponent flies are clear evidence they're not mere bandits. "Good. Send 2 of you in advance to notify, let them know I'm Fang Hao, I'm passing through and hope for a night's stay in the city." Fang Hao responds directly. The militiamen exchange glances. Then, two of them are selected to hurriedly sprint towards their lord's territory. As soon as they leave, the troops too begin to move slowly in their direction. Halfway there, a group of militiamen emerges from the distance. Past the crowd, leading to the front of the carriage. A young man at the head of the group whispers, "My lord, Fang Hao, is that you?" Fang Hao pulls back the curtain and replied, "Yes, it's me. I'm passing by and would like to stay overnight in your territory. I'll leave it at the break of dawn. Is that all right?" Ma Hong appears to be around 30, with dark skin, wearing a white short-sleeve top and black sports pants with 3 white stripes. Fang Hao observes Ma Hong, who is also curious about how Fang Hao looks. Within the channel, there were even rumors that Fang Hao was a special forces operative, highly skilled in combat technique. Others say Fang Hao has even awakened a system cheat. There's all kinds of speculation. But only seeing him now, did they find that Fang Hao's appearance was much more ordinary than expected. Yet, he's still quite a handsome young man. Compared to his looks, what surprised Ma Hong more was the lavish army accompanying Fang Hao. Not only does it include high-tier specials, but also 2 orange-tiered heroes. Such luxurious arrangement, even in his dreams, he wouldn't dare to imagine. Ma Hong clears his throat and immediately says, "Of course, my lord, you're always welcome." With an army like Fang Hao's, giving him notice of their approach is already quite respectful of him. If Ma Hong didn't agree, Fang Hao could conquer his city in the blink of an eye. "Good, then could you lead the way? It's getting late and my men are tired." Fang Hao continued. Chapter 628. "All right, no problem." Ma Hong immediately led the way for the army originating from Lyss city. The troop moved on for another half an hour. They could already see the city. Ma Hong's territory was located in the middle of a dense forest, with many trees around it already felled. Some logging yards and pastures were set up. His city was developed quite well, the city walls almost met the level 6 standard, and watchtowers were built at the 4 corners of the walls. There were soldiers standing guard on the towers. The city gate was wide open, with many obstacles and iron spikes placed on both sides. Many inhabitants of the city were standing in front of the city gate. There were men, women, old and young among the locals. Apparently, some refugees had settled in the city, and there were quite a few of them. Under Ma Hong's guidance, the large troop smoothly entered the city. Fang Hao got off the carriage, surrounded by Dimitrija and others. Ma Hong stood on the perimeter and said, "Boss Fang Hao, I'm afraid we don't have enough accommodation in the city for all your people." There weren't many houses in the city. The number was not sufficient to accommodate the entire army. Of course, Fang Hao didn't intend to take up the villagers' houses. So he directly said, "Ma Hong, just offer us 3 single rooms, we brought tents for the others." "Oh, all right." Ma Hong immediately responded. While Ma Hong was preparing the rooms, Rebecca also stepped out of the carriage. Accompanied by her trusted aide, she came to Fang Hao. "I didn't expect you to be quite well known that even people here can recognize you," Rebecca said softly. Although she didn't show up, she heard their conversation. It was clear they hadn't met before. But the other party kept calling him boss, which sounded quite affectionate. "Man's charm, can't help it," Fang Hao flicked his hair. Rebecca snorted, looking disdainful. After a while, Ma Hong came over and looked at Rebecca in surprise. A woman who combines dignity and charm would attract the attention of men wherever she goes. He quietly gave Fang Hao a thumbs up. The latter also shot back a knowing glance. 1830. Ma Hong cleared his throat gently and said, "Boss, the rooms are ready. Why don't you stay in my lord's mansion? It's quite nice." The latter also shot back a knowing glance. Ma Hong cleared his throat gently and said, "Boss, the rooms are ready. Why don't you stay in my lord's mansion? It's quite nice." "No need, we're just staying for one night and we do not want to impose on you," Fang Hao declined politely. This place was just a transit point on their journey. They couldn't occupy other people's living space wherever they go, or they would be no different from brigands. The reason he asked for a few rooms was mainly because of Rebecca. Living in a tent was no issue for him. Seeing that Fang Hao was serious, Ma Hong nodded and said, "All right, boss. Let me show you the rooms." Ma Hong led the way to the prepared rooms. They were 2 stone buildings, each with 3 rooms. Fang Hao asked for 3, so he prepared 6, so the heroes could also rest separately. After the tour, Fang Hao began to set up camp and started preparing for dinner. Inside Ma Hong's lord's mansion, a servant brought tea and placed it in front of Fang Hao and Dimitrija. Ma Hong sat opposite them and asked cautiously, "Boss Fang Hao, where are you and all these people headed?" He asked tentatively, somehow afraid of probing too much but also very curious. "We're heading to a city in the south. You don't have to worry, we will leave early tomorrow morning," Fang Hao explained. With Fang Hao's assurance of departure tomorrow morning, Ma Hong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Yet maintaining a polite tone, he responded, "No rush, boss. You're more than welcome to stay for a few more days. Although my place isn't anything special, we do have enough food." The geographical location of Ma Hong's territory was actually quite good. The surrounding mountain forest resources were abundant, and all the weapons and armors for the soldiers were supplied by Fang Hao. Even some of the linen clothing worn by the residents had the logo of the Bone Textile Store. Good quality and low price, it was indeed welcomed by Ma Hong. "By the way, we will be heading south from here. Are there any enemies or wild animals we should be aware of?" Fang Hao continued to ask. Sitting there, he actually wanted to ease Ma Hong's tension. By letting him know that the troop will leave tomorrow, and that they have no intention on his territory. At the same time, Fang Hao wanted to learn about any potential dangers ahead from him to better prepare himself. While pondering, Ma Hong slowly said, "On the way southward, there's still a long uninhabited area, with many group beasts along the way. They only attack scattered humans, so I assume they won't dare to attack your army." After a slight pause, he slapped his thigh and continued, "Oh yes, I've recruited many refugees here. They fled from the southern villages. I heard there's a powerful brigand group over there." Brigands. In fact, the combat power of brigands was quite limited. If it were the usual brigand strongholds of 1 to 200 people, they would never dare to attack his troop. According to Ma Hong, this brigand group must have had some differences. As expected, Ma Hong continued, "Boss Fang Hao, you probably don't know, but this brigand group is called the Life Taker Brigand Group. They're notorious, but they very seldom rob the official teams on the road. Considering your troop is large, I don't think they will dare provoke you." Chapter 629. Official teams refer to city teams within the Federation. How many people are in the robber camp? Fang Hao showed an interest. Robber camps themselves are also considered exploration bases. Clearing a camp could also yield chest rewards. He might not deliberately attempt to clear out this robber team, but it would be helpful to know the enemy in case of a confrontation. According to refugees who traveled through here, there are nearly 1,000. As you know, few people here are able to count properly, so they only have a rough estimate, and can't describe the exact number, said Ma Hong. A robber group of nearly 1,000 people is indeed considered a large-scale team. As for their own team dispatched from Lyss City, the one they were escorting had only nearly 2,000 people. If the enemy launched a surprise attack, it could potentially cause severe damage. "Are you clear on the heroes and the soldier levels?" Fang Hao continued to ask. Ma Hong shook his head, "The refugees couldn't explain clearly. Back then, because I feared that the robbers would attack, I specifically inquired about it and added defenses on the city wall. In the end, the robbers didn't attack, so I didn't pay much attention to these matters." Fang Hao nodded, indicating that he understood. To put it straightforwardly, in the case of being unable to use the Bone Dragon and Undead abilities, this robber named Life Taker did pose a threat to this team. At the same time, Ma Hong also mentioned that robbers generally would not attack passing teams. He hoped that both parties would avoid trouble for each other. If they hindered his journey, Fang Hao swore to send the Bone Dragon overnight and clear out the robbers' camp. After chatting a few more words with Ma Hong, the sky gradually dimmed. Fang Hao leisurely rose, intending to return to his place to rest. Hearing that Fang Hao was leaving, Ma Hong breathed a sigh of relief. Although Fang Hao had a high reputation in the channel and was supported by most transmigrators, when he saw Fang Hao's true strength, it was still awe-inspiring. Thousands of soldiers, carts packed with supplies. A large number of higher-level soldiers, and orange-grade heroes. Any of which he could not compete with. He only now realized the gap between him and the true power players. In this chaotic continent, there were no rules or laws. The rule on this continent was the survival of the fittest. Even if Fang Hao wanted to occupy his territory, he had no means to resist. The fact that Fang Hao had no interest in his territory at all was what he most wanted to see. After seeing Fang Hao out of the Lord's mansion and instructing his people to prepare all kinds of goods for Fang Hao, he returned to his own room to rest. The next morning, the team started to pack up tents. The army gradually left Ma Hong's territory and continued on their journey. At departure, Ma Hong bid them farewell. Mr. Fang Hao, keep in touch when you have time. Fang Hao nodded and waved goodbye to Ma Hong as well. As the team gradually moved away, Ma Hong, who was standing at the door, heaved a deep sigh of relief. Finally, he had sent Fang Hao off. Even if Fang Hao was courteous, he still brought an enormous pressure. He didn't sleep well the previous night. Waking up several times, he dreamt that he was dragged off by 2 orange heroes and beheaded. Lord, will we continue hunting today? The militia's inquiry brought Ma Hong back to reality. Ma Hong felt his own neck. Yes, let everyone go hunting. I'll go back and rest first. Call me if anything happens. Yes, Lord. After that, the militia organized and began to go hunting in small groups. As time passed, the team from Lyss City traveled away 2 days at a time. The speed of the team was not slow, and even because of the dwarf carts, it relieved the burden on the horses, allowing them to travel twice as fast as before. Fang Hao sat in the cart, looking a bit tired due to the fatigue of the journey. The large map on the Book of Lords automatically recorded the South's unlocked map status. They could see that they were already quite far away from the main city. Suddenly, night fell once more. This time, they were not so lucky to have any cities nearby for them to stay the night. The team selected an open location and started to set up camp and build a temporary base. Rebecca and Fang Hao each arranged for people to scout the surrounding area. They drove away and killed nearby beasts. Fang Hao jumped off the carriage, stretched his sore back. He opened the Book of Lords and started to make some tools to assist the soldiers in establishing defenses more quickly. As for dinner, Fang Hao prepared hot pot ingredients, as well as a lot of meat and vegetables. Even in the tents, there were mattresses and quilts taken out from his storage space. There were even complete sets of pajamas. If it weren't for the fact that they were passing through for one night, Fang Hao could have directly set up a new camp from here. After dinner, Fang Hao returned to his own tent. The surrounding tents belonged to people like Dimitrija and Aseti, so he didn't need to worry about safety. Additionally, there were a lot of people on rotational night watches. Late at night, in a forest south of the temporary silver mine, the hazy moonlight, like a fog woven from silver gauze, enveloped the whole forest. Clip-clop! Clip-clop! Urgent hooves rustled in the dark forest. Under the moonlight, a knight dressed in leather armor continually urged his horse to speed up, harness in hand. Non-stop travel. Eventually, he stopped before a concealed fort in the forest. The knight spoke loudly to the person on the fort gate. The fort gate opened, and the knight hurriedly walked towards the central building. He pushed open the building gate and walked directly in. In the room, several people appeared to be waiting for the knight's return. The knight went to the middle and declared loudly, "Big, I found the military camp from Lyss City. At least 1,000 people and they're expected to arrive here by tomorrow noon. Did you see Rebecca? She is worth 50,000 gold coins," a deep voice echoed from the front. Chapter 630. A few burning torches illuminated the dim room. In the hall, several men were seated. The man at the head of the table was sitting with a bold and confident swagger. Even though the autumn night was getting colder, the man was still bare-chested, revealing his strong muscles. On the man's chest, there was a dark red brand. It resembled a triangular bridle, with a human head hanging upside down. "Have you seen Rebecca?" The man's voice was as grating as sandpaper. The scout replied promptly, "Indeed, I saw a woman being escorted down from the carriage. Judging from the tight security, it should be Lady Rebecca, the city lord's wife." "Ha ha ha." The man burst out laughing and continued, "Let the brothers rest well tonight. Be sharp when you step onto the battlefield tomorrow. If we take down this team, the money we get will be enough for you all to live lavishly for the rest of your lives." "Yes, big brother." The scout promptly retreated, relaying the boss's words. This was the camp of the Life-Taker bandits. The man sitting in the middle was the leader of the Life-Takers. The people sitting in the hall belonged to the leader of the Flaming Camp, a tyrant named Trollop. Being called a tyrant was not his heroic nickname, but the name given to him by his subordinates because of his brutality. When it came to killing, he did not discriminate between men and women, old and young. What he saw was your value. Countless villages had been destroyed by the life-taker bandits, those who escaped became the heralds of their notoriety. As the largest bandit stronghold in this area, their force had expanded to 2,000 men. Every year, the caravans passing through this area had to pay a toll to the life-taker camp. After the scout left, only the core members of the life-takers remained in the room. One of them asked, "Big brother, attacking the city of the 100 Cities Federation's Federal Conference is not an easy task. Even if we really succeed, the Federal Conference won't let us off. What can be robbed and what cannot be robbed, they knew it clearly at heart. All along, the convoys heading to their city from the Federal Conference had been ignored by the life-taker camp. That is why they have been able to survive until now. But today, their leader seemed to have chosen a different path, intending to rob Lyss city." A smirk appeared on Trollop's face as he said, "So what if the Federation sends forces to encircle us? If it comes to that, we can abandon this place. As long as we've got money, we can live lavishly anywhere. Big brother, are you mad? We've worked so hard to get the camp to this point, how can you say we'll just give it up?" Someone exclaimed. Even though this was a bandit camp, the present condition was a result of their efforts over several years. Abandoning the camp over such a minor issue, they naturally felt some reluctance. Despite this, Trollop was still confident and lowered his voice, "I'm not hiding it from you guys. This time, our client is the Marshall family. As long as we kill all the troops in Lyss city and capture Rebecca, the money they'll provide will be enough for us to spend a lifetime. Plus, they've promised us a legitimate identity, no more skulking about." Trollop's voice was very low, only the few people in the room could hear clearly. This was obviously a matter that needed to be kept confidential and couldn't be shared with the rest of their men. Even so, the few core members in the room were taken aback. They knew well about the Marshall family, a very wealthy merchant group. They were reassured once they learned that their orders had been arranged with an escape plan. The topic also shifted from whether to attack or not to how they are going to lavishly spend this dirty money in the future. "Big brother, I've heard that Rebecca is a real beauty, with skin whiter than sheep's milk, and softer than silk." "That's right, big brother. When you snatch her, you enjoy first. Then let the brothers have a taste too, we won't mind your leftovers." Trollop scorned, "Stop talking nonsense. The Marshalls specifically asked for Rebecca. They obviously want this woman. If you guys mess with her, how are we gonna get paid?" "Big brother, you're being foolish. Rebecca is already married, she's not a virgin. Who would know if we have fun with her? Just clean her up a bit afterwards, we just have to vehemently deny everything." "Exactly, big brother. She's a well-known lady of the Federation. If we miss out on her, there will be no place for regret." The brothers chimed in with one another. Trollop, in truth, was somewhat convinced. After thinking, he said, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Don't spread these words out. Rest well today, set up the trap on the road tomorrow. If Rebecca escapes, we won't get the money, and our current situation would be jeopardized." "We understand, big brother, he he he." The men chuckled and returned to their respective places. There was not the slightest bit of tension, even though they were to battle in the morning. Early the next morning, the golden sun rays painted a transparent layer on the leather tents. Fang Hao cleaned up and received the breakfast passed over by the Lionheart Knight. The breakfast was quite simple, consisting of smoked meat and a bowl of porridge. After filling his stomach simply, Fang Hao packed up his bedding, cooking utensils and everything else into his storage space. They still had several days of travel ahead, all these things were still needed, so naturally, he couldn't throw them away. He waited until the large team was ready. Chapter 631. They began their continuing journey, relentlessly moving forward in the southern direction. They kept going until noon. They then entered a forest. The forest on both sides was dense, yet eerily quiet. In the entire area, all one could hear were the concentrated footsteps of the team, and the sounds of the wagon wheels grinding against the stones of the road. It seemed as if the entire army had entered a secret realm, where the air was completely still, with only the army continuously advancing. Just as Fang Hao was contemplating whether to release the skeleton sparrow to scout the situation from the sky, the convoy suddenly began to slow down, gradually coming to a stop. A cavalryman ran up from the front, leaning over to whisper near the wagon, "Sir, a trade caravan ahead has had a mishap. Their cart has overturned and they are currently retrieving their goods. I am afraid we might have to wait some time before the road is clear. Fang Hao blinked, following the line of the convoy to see what was happening ahead. There was a cart, full of goods, overturned in the middle of the road. The goods from the cart were scattered all over the ground, and people dressed as drivers and mercenaries were collecting the goods and calming the startled horses. This road was quite narrow to begin with. The army could not pass until the other party's cart was moved to make way. Fang Hao looked around, feeling that stopping in this vicinity posed an indescribable sense of danger. It felt as though countless eyes hidden in the bushes were observing them quietly. The thick forest on both sides of the road would allow people to sneak through. But the wagon and horses could not pass if they detoured off the road. This sudden mishap of a caravan on a path as narrow as this, raised suspicions about a plotted scheme. Having traveled for 2 days, the team was reminded of the large gang of robbers mentioned by Ma Hong. "What does Rebecca say?" Fang Hao asked. Whispering in a low voice, the cavalryman replied, "The lady has ordered the team to go into defensive mode. They have recognized the rogue banner on the caravan up ahead and have dispatched a person to convey the request to clear the road as quickly as possible. Every caravan owns its own banner that symbolizes its identity. Each city and family has a banner that portrays who they belong to, which they hang, whether on the road to represent their identity or at home. Since Rebecca recognized the banner of the caravan ahead, she couldn't directly order an attack." I see." Fang Hao nodded, not adding more words. Just as everyone was silently waiting. Mounted on horses, Angia and Lori's ears twitched subtly. Orcs have better sensory abilities than humans. Certain subtle noises might fool human ears, but it's harder to fool the orcs. Angia guided his horse towards the wagon. Without looking sideways, he whispered, "There's an ambush." Upon hearing this, Fang Hao felt a tug at his heart. Then the overturned cart ahead was indeed a trap designed to delay them. "Don't panic, tell Rebecca that there's an ambush, and to be careful," Fang Hao whispered. But before Angia could inform Rebecca, the soldiers attempting to help the overturned cart were suddenly attacked. The frosty swords pierced their bodies as they aided in pushing the cart. They fell onto the ground, faces filled with fear and surprise. By now, no one needed Fang Hao's reminder. Everyone understood what was happening. The commander in Rebecca's army spoke in a loud voice, issuing the order to prepare for battle. At the same time, whoosh! An arrow shot out from the bushes on the left, making a chiming sound as it lodged into the side of a wagon. This arrow was like a command unto itself. Whoosh! Whoosh! Arrows flew, attacking the army of Lyss City. Even though they knew of the ambush, several soldiers of Lyss City were still hit by the arrows amidst the confusion, crying out as they fell off their horses. Fang Hao's side also came under arrow attack. He lay low on the floor of the wagon, surrounded by the sounds of arrows whizzing past and piercing the wagon's sides. "Overturn the supply wagons, prepare for a counterattack," Aseti shouted aloud. The Lionheart Knights overturned the supply wagons, leaning against them for cover against the flurry of arrows. Bang! 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 As the Lionheart Knights began firing back into the bushes. Although they couldn't verify the enemy's location, they could still roughly judge it by the trajectory of the inbound arrows. With each pull of the trigger, the knights were sending intimidating shots back at their hidden assailants. At such a close range, the power of the rifles greatly surpassed the bow and arrows in the hands of their enemy. With each shot fired, shrill cries arose from the bushes, forcing the other party to stop shooting, wary of this new type of firearm hitting them. Arrows and gunfire kept calling out to each other. At the same time, Dmitrija took a deep breath from the side. Blue energy gathered in his abdomen, then surged up through his chest to the throat. Whoosh! The next second, a thick fog was expelled from Dmitrija's mouth, rapidly spreading down the road. It enveloped Lisbeth's entire team. The thick fog surrounded the team on the road, also obscuring the enemy's vision. Whooshing! You could hear the army in the fog incessantly shifting their positions, yet because of the obstruction to their vision, they could only blindly shoot arrows. However, these arrows entering the fog were like stones tossed into an abyss. There was no feedback, nor was there any sound of a hit. Squeak! Angia opened the carriage door and pulled out Fang Hao, both hiding behind the carriage. This luxuriously decorated carriage could also fend off enemy arrows. It also attracted the enemy's attention. Looking back at his carriage, Fang Hao found it pitifully resembling a straw boat borrowing arrows, densely riddled with arrows. If he hadn't been pulled out, with the enemy continuing to target the carriage, this carriage probably wouldn't last long before it fell apart, scattering into pieces. Fang Hao leaned against a toppled supply carriage. Dimitrija came over and asked, "Lord, are you all right?" "I'm fine, can you confirm the number of enemies?" answered Fang Hao. Considering the high frequency of their arrows, the enemy was numerous and well prepared. The earlier accident of the caravan's carriage overturning was a trap set by the enemy. "The enemy's hiding places are too good, I can't confirm if there are others," Dimitrija replied quietly. "Lord, I can go scout," Lori volunteered. Her special ability was reconnaissance. Although her ears were very sharp, allowing her to roughly estimate the enemy's numbers from their footstep sounds. Whether there were others still needed to be confirmed. She was preparing for counterattacks in the dense forest. However, Fang Hao shook his head, "No need to take such a risk, Lori, go grab my backpack from the carriage." Lori quickly approached the carriage and retrieved Fang Hao's backpack. Fang Hao took it and from it, he pulled out a skeletal grey sparrow and set it on the ground. "Protect me." Upon saying this, Fang Hao closed his eyes and his body slumped. Simultaneously, a ghostly blue soul fire ignited in the hollow pupils of the skeletal grey sparrow. With the concealment of the fog, the skeletal grey sparrow quickly flew up into the sky. After reaching a certain height, it flew towards the dense forest from which the arrows came. Flying further into the forest, the enemy had yet to notice a skeletal grey sparrow leaving their formation. Perhaps they never imagined that someone would use this method for reconnaissance. The sparrow smoothly flew into the dense forest. Below it was an orderly line of enemies. These enemies, dressed in different armors, leather, plate, appeared like a bandit gang hastily formed. All these differently dressed bandits bore the same tattoo on their bare arms and necks. The design resembled a noose. Life takers. At this moment, Fang Hao was able to confirm the enemy's identity. It was the life takers that Ma Hong mentioned. But Fang Hao was even more curious. Ma Hong had said that the life takers wouldn't dare touch official teams. Moreover, in the past years, they had never ambushed teams from Lyss City. Why did they suddenly appear here this year, setting an ambush as if they knew their route? Was there a mole among them? Fang Hao, still controlling the skeletal grey sparrow, continued to fly towards the back of the enemy formation. Sure enough, behind these archers were a large number of close combat bandits. At the same time, low voices could be heard from below, "Boss, the fog is too thick. If we accidentally shoot Rebecca, there goes our money." Hearing this, Fang Hao's heart was stirred. They came for Rebecca. Chapter 632. Whistle. 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 The silent forest began to tremble violently. A rain of arrows shot out, attacking the wagon and the soldiers on the road. The neighing of horses and the wailing of soldiers filled the entire area. Ding! 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 Arrows penetrated the wagon, which shook continuously. Fang Hao felt as if a hailstorm had begun in the sky, a relentless, concentrated assault on the wagon body. He lay at the bottom of the wagon, pressing Rebecca firmly beneath him. At this moment, he had no chance to feel the softness beneath him, his ears filled only with the sound of arrows embedding into the carriage wall. Fortunately, Rebecca's two wagons were sturdy, and no arrows managed to penetrate them. A string of orders came from outside the wagon. "Overturn the wagons and use them as shields, prepare to counterattack," a Seti's voice rang out. Wagon after wagon filled with supplies were overturned and propped up. The surrounding soldiers, as well as some mercenaries, quickly hid behind them and began to counterattack. Compared to the rest of the people's archery counterattacks, the rifles of the Lionheart Knights garnered everyone's attention. Click click boom! 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 The Lionheart Knights, proficiently pulling the bolt, began to retaliate against the forest from where the arrows were being shot. Although it was impossible to confirm the enemy's position, they could make rough estimates based on the trajectory of where the arrows were being shot from. At such close range, the power of a rifle far exceeded the arrows in the enemy's hands. One after another, shots were fired. Sudden wails began to resound from within the forest. Clearly, enemies had been hit, and the rifle fire had forced the enemies to slow down their attack speed. Arrows and bullets continuously clipped each other. Just then, the dense forest to the left rear of the ranks began to violently shake as well. Everyone's faces dramatically changed. It was obvious that the enemy had more reinforcements rapidly approaching. Moreover, judging by the scope of the forest's shaking, their numbers were large. This was a pincer attack. If we don't charge out quickly enough, everyone's lives will be at risk. Dmitrija and Aseti both glanced at the hedgehog-like wagon. He's in the wagon, he's safe. I'm going to get him out of there, Angia said. Wait. Dmitrija spoke and then took a deep breath immediately. Blue energy gathered in his abdomen, then surged up to his throat. Whew! In the next second, Dmitrija exhaled a thick fog, which quickly spread along the road. It enveloped the entire Lisbeth team. The thick fog surrounded the team on the road, while also obstructing the enemy's view. There was a bustling sound. You could hear the soldiers in the fog constantly changing positions, yet because their vision was blocked, they could only blindly shoot arrows into the fog. However, once the arrows entered the fog, they disappeared like stones thrown into an abyss. No feedback, and no sound of anything being hit. Angia didn't hesitate any longer and led several people straight to the wagon's location. The magnificent wagon was now unrecognizable. The horses pulling the wagon were dead, the right side of the carriage was completely filled with arrows. The wagon continued to shake violently. The tormented wooden planks could not withstand such frequent attacks. Arrows were already passing through, shooting into the carriage interior. Fang Hao laid on the ground, grabbed the leather armor from the soft seat and put it on Rebecca. In the rush, his movements were a bit rough. He forcefully pushed it onto her chest where it wouldn't quite fit. At the moment, Rebecca was somewhat dazed and pale. What do we do? It's okay. Now is not the time to panic, Fang Hao forced himself to calm down. He had ways to save his life. Even if they were surrounded, he could take advantage of the demon teleportation and leave directly. He could ensure the safety of himself and several of his heroes. However, now was not the time to retreat. While he clumsily outfitted Rebecca with the armor, he realized that the rhythm of arrows bombarding the carriage had significantly lessened. Fog seeped through the cracks in the carriage wall. Squeak! The door on the other side of the wagon was pulled open, revealing Angia's face. Get off quickly! The arrows on the right side were still shooting at the wagon based on their memory. Angia pulled the two of them out. They all huddled together and headed towards the rest of the group. Running, Fang Hao looked back at the devastated wagon. The originally magnificent carriage had turned into a prickly, box-shaped hedgehog. Like the story of Zhujiang borrowing arrows, it was completely filled with arrows. If they hadn't been pulled out and the enemy kept shooting at the wagon, the carriage wouldn't hold out much longer and would fall apart into a pile of debris. Seeing that Fang Hao and Rebecca had returned safe, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Even the mercenaries who didn't care about the two of them, were worried about their pay. My lord, are you okay? Aseti moved closer and asked. Dmitrija, along with a group of Lionheart Knights, looked over at the same time. I'm fine, can we confirm the number of enemies? Fang Hao asked. From the intensity of the arrows, the number of enemies was large, and they were well prepared. The accident of the merchant caravan overturning was a trap set up by the enemy. Judging by the density of the arrows, there are over 1,000 enemies, and there are many enemies approaching from the left rear, said Aseti. Chapter 633. Sir, Madam, we should charge in from the right before the enemy reinforcements encircle us, take out the hidden archers inside, and then retreat, said a mercenary captain quickly based on experience. Right, now is the best timing. Once we're surrounded, I'm afraid few of us will escape. Another captain commented. No, the enemy is well prepared. The dense forest on the right is too quiet. They wouldn't make such a mistake. Aseti opposed immediately. But if we continue delaying, we will end up being more passive, argued a member from the mercenary army. A disagreement emerged within the team. The mercenaries, even Rebecca's trusted aides, intended to break through from the right. However, Aseti insisted that they lack enough intelligence, and if they made an inaccurate judgment, they would be throwing themselves into the enemy's trap. The two parties instantly ended in a deadlock. They all turned to look at Fang Hao and Rebecca. Sir, I can go scout. Lori volunteered. The Blackfoot Cat tribe are skilled at reconnaissance and gathering intelligence. But such scouting isn't meant to be under the enemy's watch. If Lori steps out of the mist, chances are he will get targeted. This approach would be very risky. No need, I'll use a dust sparrow to scout, you all prepare for a breakthrough. Fang Hao said immediately. Hearing Fang Hao's decision, both parties immediately quieted down. Although the mercenaries did not understand what dust sparrow scouting means. They knew Fang Hao was a mage, and he had his quirks all the way. No more dispute, everyone started to assemble and make the final preparations. Fang Hao took out a skeletal dust sparrow from his bag and placed it on the ground. "Guard me." Having said that, Fang Hao closed his eyes and his body went limp. At the same time, a bluish soul fire ignited in the hollow pupils of the skeletal dust sparrow. With the cover of the mist, the skeletal dust sparrow quickly flew into the air. After reaching a certain height, it first flew towards the dense forest at the left rear. The enemy didn't notice a dust sparrow leaving the opposite team even as it flew deep into the forest. Perhaps they never thought anyone would use this method for scouting. The dust sparrow moved smoothly inside the forest. It flew straight towards the direction from where the forest was shaking intensely. 1834. Once the dust sparrow alighted on a tree branch. It looked down at the enemy in a somewhat surprised way. About 500 people were there, wearing a mishmash of armors. Cloth robes, leather armors, and some were even bare-chested, like a temporary band of brigands. They were dragging branches behind them, constantly shuttling back and forth in the forest, as if deliberately making a huge noise. At the same time, Fang Hao also noticed a detail. All the people ambushing him had a common trait. That was on their arms or chests. They all bore the same mark. The pattern similar to a noose. Life takers. As soon as he saw the mark, Fang Hao immediately identified their identity. They were the life takers that Ma Hong had mentioned. Apparently, Rebecca's information was already outdated. This band of bandits, originally only a few hundred strong, had long expanded on such a large scale. More than that, they dared to attack them. But Fang Hao had his doubts. Even if these bandits were bold, how could they know that his party would be passing by here at this moment? Could there be a traitor? This shouldn't be the case. Fang Hao made a quick circle in the air, still, he did not find any enemies. Then, he flew towards the dense forest on the right side of the team. In the forest on the right, the first thing he saw were the archers launching continuous attacks. And behind these archers, Fang Hao saw a large crowd of people. These people, obviously, were the main force of the bandits. Uniform armors, uniform iron round shields, and black iron knight swords. He was familiar with these equipments. He had sold them in the channel himself. It seemed that there was a fellow in the gang of life takers. These bandits were quietly hiding in this forest. Like beasts waiting for prey, they were silently staring at the mist outside the forest. They were many in number, filling the entire area covered by his view. Probably, they numbered more than 2,000. The left forest was making a huge noise, the trees were shaking, as if a herd of animals were moving. On the right, there were archers attacking, but behind them was the hiding place for the bandit elites. At this point, Fang Hao immediately reacted when he compared the situation on both sides. These bandits were playing tricks. If Fang Hao didn't have this scouting method, he would undoubtedly think the left forest was vibrating violently because a large army was enclosing them. In a rush, people would think that the right side, which was being attacked by archers, but not showing any movements at the back, was safe. But by doing so, they would fall right into the enemy's trap. How could these bandits be so smart? At the same time, Fang Hao was somewhat surprised by the number of bandits below and their overall quality. In a head-on confrontation, they might not necessarily lose. There might be some casualties as well. Moreover, they had a few maidens in the team, including Rebecca, who were completely incapable of fighting. This was indeed somewhat dangerous. Having discovered the enemy's layout, Fang Hao had a plan in his mind. When he was about to release the god's presence and prepare for the upcoming battle, out of the corner of his eye, he saw heavy machinery being pushed forward at the back of the bandit camp and his heart suddenly tightened. 4 men were straining to push it forward. The heavy wooden wheels crushed the vegetation, leaving a trail of depressions in the ground. The wheels were covered with an old sheet of oilcloth that was propped up from the front, revealing a large cannon barrel. Chapter 634. Damn, how could they have cannons? Fang Hao couldn't believe what he was seeing on the barrel of the gun carriage. Though only a part is visible, it was clear that it was a cannon. He was baffled, even the prosperous city of Lyss didn't have such weaponry. How could these bandits possess cannons? His eyes scanned the entire force of bandits again, confirming that there was only one cannon. After his investigation, Fang Hao didn't dare to delay any further, and immediately cancelled his god's presence. Awake within the ranks, Fang Hao quickly relayed to everyone what he had seen. Without consulting anyone else, he began strategizing for battle. The enemy's layout was obvious. There wasn't much to discuss. Fang Hao's task was to get his people out of the enemy's encirclement at the smallest cost. He could perhaps kill them off with determination. But that wasn't a cost Fang Hao was willing to bear. He wanted to first get his team out, and then he had countless ways to destroy the bandit stronghold. His skeleton army hadn't been used in a while. Fang Hao immediately conveyed the subsequent plan of action. There was no need to worry about the right side, the team will break through to the left when the time comes. Killing off the noisy ragtag forces would allow them to retreat. Then, they could regroup and return for revenge. He communicated the battle plan to his allies. Informed the leaders of the various mercenary groups. The mercenaries didn't have much to say, for they wouldn't succeed on their own. Whatever was said here, would be decided upon. Fang Hao took out his Starfire magic wand from his storage and held the Thunderhawk blade in his other hand. The magic power was gathered. He then cast the earth elemental magic, Glay Rolling Stone into the forest. The 2-meter diameter Glay Stone was rolling quickly, initiating a rolling stone charge towards the enemy. The fast approaching shadow from the fog caught the attention of the bandit archers. Arrows began to land on the rolling stone. Fang Hao took a deep breath, without any hesitation. He gave the command, Dimitrija, delay the enemy as you fall back with your men. The rest follow me into the forest. The troops had been ready for a while, and upon hearing Fang Hao's command, they all rushed into the left side of the forest. Whereas Dimitrija remained hidden in the fog. Using rifles and crossbow arrows, he continually retaliated towards the right side, giving an illusion of continued resistance. The left side forest was only 100 meters from the road. The men and horses quickly rushed in. Within the protective guard of the troops, Fang Hao rushed straight into the forest. When the bandits dragging large tree branches to make noise saw the fierce-faced troops rushing in, the place where the carriage was gathered burst open in an instant, with fragments of the carriage and rocks flying everywhere. 1836. They were instantly dumbfounded. They were perplexed, standing on the spot unsure of what to do. They could not understand why the enemy would forsake the tranquil right side, and come straight for them instead. Fang Hao pushed to the front of the troops and issued a cold order, kill. With a swoosh, the soldiers and mercenaries, full of fury, charged forward with their weapons drawn. Their distances from each other lessened in an instant. A melee ensued. The sound of combat filled the entire forest. These bandits adorned in random armor and weapons, were nothing more than a miscellany force. Against properly trained soldiers, or even a few mercenaries, they stood no chance of fighting back. As soon as the conflict began, some threw down their weapons and fled. It wasn't long before these bandits were wiped clean. Meanwhile, a more fierce combat noise came from the back of the line. Fang Hao looked back. Angia, take a few men and escort Rebecca out first. The rest prepare for the second line of defense and wait for Dimitrija to return. Back line. The sound of fighting from the left forest still attracted the attention of the ambushed bandits. Needless to say, they knew the enemy started breaking out from the left side. At the same time, Dimitrija ordered the retreat of his troops into the forest. Just after retreating, boom! A rumble sounded from the front. The place where the carriage was gathered burst open in an instant, with fragments of the carriage and rocks flying everywhere. The dust covered the battlefield. At the same time, a chorus of intense shouted and the sound battle resonated from the forest behind them. The whole forest seemed to be boiling, shaking dramatically. Soon, countless figures burst out of the forest, like crazed wild beasts. Chapter 635. Dimitrija had just retreated to a dense forest with his men. From behind them emanated a cacophony of battle cries. Swarms of mountain bandits, like a torrential flood, emerged from the forest. They began to launch an attack in this direction. They held iron shields and swords in their hands, howling like deranged beasts. Boom, boom, boom. The soldiers started to retaliate. Bullets and crossbow bolts were continuously pouring towards the front. There were so many bandits that any random shot is likely to hit a target. The once ferocious bandits were falling one after another. Agonizing screams echoed through the woods. However, even more bandits surged out from the forest, as if they were not afraid of death in their attacks. Even though they didn't take the bandits seriously. Facing such a vast number, the rearguard soldiers and mercenaries swallowed nervously. Bang! The sound of cannons resounded again, exploding not far from their ranks. The shockwave of the cannonball instantly sent several soldiers flying. Their chest armor caved in, their mouths spewing blood. Dmitrija, with cold eyes, scanned the distance. He saw that the heavy mist on the road had dispersed, and in the middle of the road, a few bandits were efficiently cleaning the cannons, reloading the ammunition. As expected, they were cannons. Fortunately, they didn't fall into the enemy's trap. Otherwise, few would have been able to escape. Shush, shush. Dmitrija, his long sword swinging, wiped out all the charging enemies around him. He gave an order in a cold voice, take the wounded and continue to retreat. Rustle, rustle. The soldiers began to act. Some of them fought with the bandits who charged haphazardly, while others began to retreat with the men affected by the cannon fire. At the same time, Dmitrija, with a few, continued to withdraw. Boom! They hadn't retreated far. Their former position was once again bombarded by cannon shells. Bits of rock and debris struck their armor with a clattering sound. They fought as they retreated, unable to shake off the pursuit from behind. These bandits were more familiar with this area. Though their combat power was inferior, their movements through the dense forest were incredibly agile. They always managed to keep up, relentlessly entangling and slowing them down. At present, Dmitrija and his men were stuck in a relentless fight with the bandits. Bandits from all directions, their numbers growing. They began to employ tactics of attrition, continuously draining their combat power. At this moment, the stark difference in power between the regular army and the bandits was clearly evident. Dmitrija's side fought as they retreated, suffering relatively few casualties. The bandits, however, had taken numerous casualties despite their aggressive onslaught. Corpses littered the forest, the blood turning the vegetation a dark red. Kill! Seeing the heavily wounded Dmitrija and his men, the bandits, like wild animals that had smelled blood, became more excited, their howls resounding as they kept surging forward relentlessly. In the eyes of the bandits, killing these soldiers from Lyss city was only a matter of time. Dmitrija and his men were forced to keep falling back. Numerous sword slashes adorned their armor, and blood had begun to form a layer of brown scabs. Some of the blood was their own, but most of it was from their enemies. Though the battle continued, they could see little hope of victory. Several rearguard mercenaries, leaning on each other, were continually muttering, "Why aren't they back yet? Not back yet, damn it, where are they?" While fending off the enemy's approach. According to the plan, the army that retreated first would establish a second defense line to cover their retreat. These mercenaries were acutely aware of the cold indifference and cowardice of the nobility. Seeing that the second defense line was nowhere in sight, some began to believe that they had been abandoned. The plan Fang Hao had formulated earlier was merely to deceive them into acting as sacrificial pawns. How does that help us now? Let's stay alive first, don't get distracted. A fellow mercenary bitterly said. But there wasn't much time for discussion, the bandits surrounding them increased, like an incoming tidal wave, they were surrounded. Once a proper encirclement took place, death was inevitable. Just as their expressions hardened, and despair set in. Upon closer inspection, they noticed that the bandits' feet were ensnared by vines growing from the ground. With their feet obstructed, the charging bandits fell over like tumbling gourds. Everyone turned around abruptly. They saw 3 wood spirit guards with their arms buried in the ground. Their arms had transformed into vines, entangling the enemies. Behind these wood spirit guards were Fang Hao and a group of waiting soldiers and mercenaries. Upon witnessing this, a look of joy flashed across the faces of the rear guard. Fang Hao then said, "Deal with the close mountain bandits, lead everyone away, and retreat to the north." "Yes." "Rustle, rustle." All of them immediately charged. Like a tiger diving into a group of lambs, they directly attacked the swarm of bandits. The original rearguard began to fall back. Fang Hao stood on a large rock. He held the Thunderhawk blade in his hand and began to concentrate his magic power. As the magic power gradually gathered, mist began to rise around him. This was his skill Mist Wrap. Ever since he absorbed the 0-level divinity of the Lord of Thunder, Mist Wrap, an air elemental spell, began to evolve. The mist was as thick as cotton, featuring flickering sparks of electricity. Not only could it obscure the enemy's senses, but the hidden thunderbolts were also a form of attack. It was an upgraded version of the Mist Wrap. When mist enveloped the forest, all of them, at Fang Hao's signal, quickly retreated without further delay. They followed the forest trail north for about an hour's journey. They arrived at a spacious main road. Chapter 636. Aseti placed his 2 fingers in his mouth and blew a whistle. Soon, the sound of clustered hoofbeats could be heard. Aseti's mount, Wind Demon, hurried over, followed by hundreds of horses from the original group. Among them was a humongous 4-legged giant lizard that looked somewhat foolish. In the current situation, the horses left behind would only become targets for arrows. Apart from the horses that were tied to carts and got killed by arrows immediately, the others were led away by Wind Demon. No one hesitated. Those who were injured mounted up and continued moving northwards. Outside the mountains and forests, the faces of the 3 leaders of the life-takers were shrouded in gloom as they listened to reports from their subordinates. This gloom did not only contain anger, but mostly fear and helplessness. The excitement they felt last night upon hearing Rebecca's news was proportional to the fear they felt today. They could clearly imagine Rebecca's revenge. And also the relentless pursuit of the Federation. From now onwards, they would have nowhere to hide, there would be no place for them in the human world. You goddamn wastes of life, you let them escape with so many people on our side. Chase them. If Rebecca escapes, we are all doomed. The tyrant roared. Listening to the furious rebuke of their boss, the underlings' legs trembled. Be boss, they have mages in their ranks. The entire forest is blanketed in fog that releases lightning. We can't tell where they have run off to. Bang! Hearing his subordinate's explanation only added to the tyrant's fury. He kicked him onto the ground, spitting curses. Keep looking. Spread out further. Whoever finds them first will become the 4th boss. If you don't find them, I'll slaughter all of you. Yes, yes. We will chase them immediately. The underling got up and rolled away, conveying the boss's command in a hurry. On the side, not only the face of the tyrant was ugly. The expressions of the 2nd boss, Greedy Wolf, and Li Zhenhu were also frightful. If they allowed their targets to escape, their glory days would end. It's all over, all our efforts have been wasted. After attacking the city lord of the 100 cities, the Federation will never let us off, said Greedy Wolf, his voice trembling. Just yesterday, he was suggesting they have fun with Rebecca. Now, all he could feel was fear towards Rebecca. Don't panic, we are more familiar with this area than them. Outsiders won't be able to escape this forest easily. Li Zhenhu tried to console them, but he didn't have much confidence. Li Zhenhu had his own concerns. Rumors were that Fang Hao had connections with Lyss City. He wasn't sure if Fang Hao was with the group. If Fang Hao wasn't there, or if he escaped, Li Zhenhu feared immediate retaliation from him due to his character. Li Zhenhu's words seemed to have reminded the tyrant as he said, "Right, we should split up to search for them. They can't get out of this forest so easily." The other 2 nodded, leading their respective men into the dense forest to search. The next night, the doors of Ma Hong's territory were tightly shut. After taking a relaxing hot bath, Ma Hong was about to go to bed. Then he heard loud bell rings outside his room. The sleepy Ma Hong sat up from his bed abruptly, looking out of the window with a serious expression. This bell ringing was the 2nd time he heard it. The first time was during the installation of the bell, to test whether it still worked. This 2nd time indicated that enemies were approaching. He didn't have time to think much. Simply putting on his armor, he rushed out of his room. He climbed up the city wall and looked in the direction the soldiers were pointing. He saw rows of torches forming a dragon of fire, moving fast towards them. This area was sparsely populated, so there was no doubt that the long fiery dragon was coming for them. Ma Hong's heart was thumping rapidly. Damn it, it better not be those despicable bandits. Ma Hong cursed. If it really was those bandits, his troop count wouldn't be enough to defend the city. City Lord, what do we do? A civilian soldier asked in a low voice. What else can we do? Identify the enemy, if it's the bandits, we will defend the city to our deaths, Ma Hong replied through gritted teeth. As more and more refugees came into the city, the news of the life-takers spread further. Any village they had visited had been turned into ruins, not a chicken or dog survived. The fear of life-takers was deep-seated in everyone's heart. Not only Ma Hong, but also the civilian soldiers and residents of the city were fearful. Once they heard Ma Hong's command, they all started moving immediately. They began to move rocks and prepared arrows. Their eyes were filled with fear as they watched the approaching fiery long dragon. Whoosh! When the crowd came within a certain range, an arrow was shot towards the front of the crowd, forcing the advancing crowd to stop immediately. Who goes there? Advance any further, and we will attack, echoed the voice of a guard in the silent night. We are from Lord Fang Hao's team and we need to rest in the city for the night, someone in the crowd shouted. Everyone turned to Ma Hong upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Ma Hong's Book of Lords received a private message. It was from Fang Hao, saying his squad had encountered some problems and needed to rest in his city again. Knowing it was really Fang Hao's squad, Ma Hong heaved a sigh of relief. No matter who it was, as long as it wasn't those damned bandits, it was fine. Chapter 637. Otherwise, his reign as lord would come to an end. They are not bandits, open the city gate, let them in, ordered Ma Hong immediately. Upon hearing that they were not bandits, the militia breathed a sigh of relief. They quickly opened the city gate. The city gate was opened. It was only when Fang Hao's group entered the city that Ma Hong realized the seriousness of the situation. The once glittering guard squad was now distinctly disheveled. Many were wounded, and some had even died. Some had dented armor, some still had arrows lodged in their bodies. They looked like defeated fugitives. Upon seeing Fang Hao in the group, Ma Hong immediately approached him. Lord Fang Hao, was your group attacked? Although Fang Hao looked reasonably okay, just weary from the journey, it was evident from his expression that he was suppressing his anger. Let's go to your lord's mansion to talk. Have someone close the city gates and strengthen the patrol, Fang Hao said. Oh, okay, Ma Hong agreed, albeit somewhat confused. Still, he carried out Fang Hao's instructions. The city gate was closed again, and additional personnel were deployed on the city walls. Inside the lord's mansion, Fang Hao, Dimitrija, Aceti, Angia, Rebecca, and the leaders of the 4 mercenary groups were present. The mercenary groups had suffered the most losses, with casualties in every team. Following them were the trusted aides and the Lionheart Knights. These individuals, bodies stained with blood and emanating anger, sat there, making Ma Hong, the host, rather uneasy. Without allowing anyone else to speak, Fang Hao took the lead. Bring in the man we captured. Soon, a bandit with both arms broken was brought in. He had been captured during their retreat. Since there were no pursuers on the road, they had brought him here. They roughly tossed the bandit onto the ground. He was pale and weak, looking decidedly unwell. Everyone watched him with anger in their eyes. Who are you people? Fang Hao asked him, his voice deep. The bandit struggled to lift his head and glanced at Fang Hao. If I tell you, will you spare my life? He may have been a bandit, but he wasn't foolish. He realized this was the only time he had a bargaining chip. Once he revealed everything, he feared he would lose even that much. Fang Hao eyed him deeply. That depends on whether you are truthful or not. All right, ask away, said the bandit. Who are you people? We belong to the Life Takers camp. This time, as per the orders of Boss Tyrant, we set up an ambush specifically for you, said the bandit without hesitation. Upon hearing Life Takers camp, Ma Hong's face paled. Fang Hao was indeed in conflict with the ruthless bandits of Life Takers camp. And it seemed, Fang Hao had suffered losses. Feeling satisfied with his demeanor, Fang Hao nodded and continued his inquiry. How did you know we would pass through there today? Half a month ago, we began monitoring that route. Last night, we suddenly received a message about your whereabouts. Why were you watching us? What is your goal? That? I'm not sure. The order we received was to kill all, except the woman in the middle carriage. Upon hearing this, Fang Hao and the others looked at Rebecca in sync. Rebecca's carriage was extremely luxurious and conspicuous. Sparing only Rebecca and killing all the others was indeed ruthless. This meant these reckless bandits had attacked an official unit, all for the sake of capturing Rebecca. All eyes turned to Rebecca, but she just shook her head lightly. I have no idea. Indeed, had she known something, they wouldn't have been ambushed. Fang Hao turned to the bandit again. Tell me about your stronghold, who is the leader, and how many people do you have? Our boss is called Tyrant, the second in command is Greedy Wolf, and the third is Li Zhenhu. They. Wait. Did you say Li Zhenhu? As the bandit was speaking, Ma Hong, who had been quiet, suddenly interrupted. The sudden exclamation startled everyone. Ah! Yes, he is called Li Zhenhu, confirmed the bandit. From the name, it could be inferred that Li Zhenhu was a transmigrator. Those weapons and armors amongst the bandits were probably exchanged by Li Zhenhu through the area channel. However, what was the reason for Ma Hong's surprise? What? Do you know him? Fang Hao turned to Ma Hong. Ma Hong hesitated for a moment, as if something dawned on him. He angrily muttered, "Damn, that Li Zhenhe bastard is fishing here." Chapter 638. Fang Hao was growing more confused the more he listened. How is this about fishing? Ma Hong thought for a moment before he explained. Zhenhe is quite active in the alliance, showing off fancy equipment and such in the channel every day to attract people. If he's actually working for Life Taker, these newcomers are all in danger. As Ma Hong explained, he continued to nervously wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. There was something else he didn't mention. He had already contacted Li Zhenhe. If his place was attacked by the mountain thieves, he would take his people and turn to Li Zhenhe for protection. Now that he thought about it, if he took his people there, wasn't he willingly walking into the trap after cleaning himself? The thought of that made his cold sweat pour out uncontrollably. From Ma Hong's explanation, Fang Hao understood his meaning. Transmigrators had been here for more than half a year, and during that time, alliances of all sizes were beginning to form in the region. These alliances focused on recruitment, and no one would idle about to provoke Fang Hao. Li Zhenhe, on the other hand, seemed to be exploiting this to fish. He was hoodwinking every surrounding city lord to join him before launching a devastating attack. But what did he stand to gain from this? What could he gain from these transmigrators? Fang Hao then returned his attention to the mountain thief below. "Tell me more about this Li Zhenhe." "Oh, okay. I only heard rumors that Li Zhenhe is highly regarded by our boss, he even reformed our gang, and all our weapons came from him. And what happened to the people he tricked?" Fang Hao continued to inquire. "They were sold. Besides stealing money and food, women and children, as well as men who refused to join, were sold as slaves," the mountain thief shared. Concerned looks crossed the faces of Fang Hao and his companions. It seemed that the transmigrants who had been deceived were likely sold off as well. "Where were they sold to?" asked Fang Hao. "I am not sure about that. Some were sold to nobles, some were sold as laborers. But those transmigrators you are asking about, they were said to be gifted individuals and were sold at a higher price." "I don't know who exactly bought them," the mountain thief answered seriously. As the fact about transmigrators was no longer a secret. All factions saw the value of the transmigrators. Nobles were recruiting transmigrators, faceless ones were hunting them, and the dwarves managed to upgrade the musket into a bolt-action rifle due to the knowledge of the transmigrators. It could be said that transmigrators held great value, especially those with special skills who could fetch an astonishing price. It seemed that Li Zhenhe tricked transmigrators for this reason. "All right, continue telling me about your band of thieves. Once you've finished, you can go and rest, have a full meal, and get a good night's sleep." Fang Hao changed the subject away from the issue of slave trafficking. This would be considered after they had taken down the gang's stronghold. The most important thing at this moment was to understand the strength of the gang. "Yes, thank you, sir." Licking his dry lips, the mountain thief continued, "Our boss, the tyrant, is at level 8, Greedy Wolf is at level 7, and altogether we have about 3,000 combat power. Oh, and we have 3 cannons." The mountain thief in front of him was obedient. His village had been raided, and he had joined the bandits just to survive. He had no loyalty to any boss. He answered whatever Fang Hao asked, and even volunteered information about the inner workings of the bandits. Life Taker had 3 cannons, not just the one Fang Hao had seen. Where they got them from remained unknown. These were their trump card for quickly breaking through city gates. "Can your camp accommodate so many people?" Fang Hao continued to ask. "Not exactly, we have 5 camps in total. The main camp is in the middle, surrounded by 4 smaller ones. It was the third boss idea. He said it formed a kind of formation, where they could protect each other and assist each other," the mountain thief explained. Apparently, Li Zhenhe was quite crafty. Regardless of whether or not this arrangement was effective, it definitely served as an impressive strategy for a bunch of illiterate bandits. He was essentially acting as their think tank. "How many people are in each camp?" The mountain thief thought for a moment before replying. "There are about 800 of the boss's trusted followers in the main camp, the rest are all in the 4 smaller camps." Fang Hao nodded. After thinking for a while and deciding that he didn't have any more questions, he ordered someone to take the mountain thief back down. Once the mountain thief left, Rebecca looked rather upset. Part of the responsibility for the attack this time fell on her. Fang Hao had reminded her several times about the Life Takers, but she thought they only had a few hundred men and would not dare to make a move. This had always been the case in previous years. She did not expect that this year they would act so brazenly, even attacking a city lord's troop. This led to the casualties they suffered today. Fang Hao, what should we do now? Should we go back to Lyss city and gather our troops to retaliate? Rebecca asked, clenching her hands tightly, speaking softly. They simply could not take on 3,000 mountain thieves by themselves. The only solution she could think of was to retreat to Lyss city. But if they were to retreat and gather forces, they would not be able to attend this year's federal conference. Without giving an immediate answer, Fang Hao pondered the situation in his mind. Distance, time, manpower. He needed to consider all of these. Of course, he had to take revenge for this. In his time in this world, he had always adopted a strategy of overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers. Now that he found himself under attack, he wasn't about to let it go unnoticed. Taking a deep breath, he tried to reassure her, "It's nothing, no need to panic. They're just a bunch of mountain thieves." Chapter 639. Neither Fang Hao nor Rebecca ever took the bandits seriously. However, being stuck here is indeed troublesome. But Rebecca was still worried. "It's okay, follow my plan." Fang Hao refocused his gaze on Ma Hong and said, "Ma Hong, prepare some houses for me to arrange the injured." "Okay." Ma Hong immediately agreed. Fang Hao continued, "Rebecca, notify your trusted aides and the people of the 4 mercenary corps to retreat to 1 kilometer away 1 hour from now. Wait for my next step." "Ah? Oh, okay." Rebecca and the mercenary corps were startled. They had been fleeing for a day and a night, but now they were told to get out again. But seeing Fang Hao had some arrangements, they didn't say much. "All right, there's no other business, everyone go ahead and get busy," Fang Hao continued. Whoosh! Everyone gets up and walks out. Fang Hao didn't leave. But Ma Hong's face was quite serious. Fang Hao's army retreating a kilometer overnight had made him suspect that they might withdraw directly. After some thought, he said, "Boss Fang Hao, when you all leave, could you take my people with you? I can't hold this city on my own." He was reluctant to leave the city he had built, but what could he do? Life is more important than anything else. Once Fang Hao dismissed this place, he would be very close to death. "No, they won't live long," Fang Hao said quietly. Hearing this, Ma Hong immediately felt a murderous aura. This reminded him of Fang Hao's notorious reputation in the channel. In the channel, everyone who had risen and tried to provoke Fang Hao had already died. Perhaps Li Zhenhu would end up the same way. "Ah, whatever you say, boss, as long as we can kill those bastards, I will do whatever you ask," Ma Hong immediately clarified his position. "Give me the Book of Lords, I will eliminate these bandits, and you will be safe," Fang Hao said directly. Wanting the Book of Lords, Ma Hong immediately understood his meaning. Without any hesitation, he directly took it off his waist and handed it to Fang Hao. He had thought about handing over the Book of Lords when he proposed to follow Fang Hao. Now he had nothing else to say. Accepting the Book of Lords. You can devour the Book of Lords, level 1. Devour success, your current Book of Lords is level 6, 7/20 needed to upgrade. After devouring, Fang Hao reinserted Ma Hong as the mayor here. Seeing Fang Hao devour his Book of Lords, Ma Hong let out a sigh of relief. He didn't know why. At first, when he saw Fang Hao leading a team to his place, he was afraid that they would directly seize his city. But now, he was relieved to see Fang Hao devouring the Book of Lords. Reattaching the Book of City Lord to his waist, Ma Hong dared to ask tentatively, "Boss Fang Hao, what's next? Shall we retreat tonight, and kill back the next year?" Given the current situation, they really had no way to deal with these bandits. "I remember you once mentioned to me that there is an empty territory nearby," Fang Hao brought up the matter of the last time. Ma Hong once mentioned that there was an empty territory nearby, which was empty when he discovered it. He didn't know if someone left or had already died. "Ah, yes, there is one, but its level is not high, it should be between 2 to 3, and it has no resources," Ma Hong said immediately. "Okay, 1 hour later, take us there. Aseti will lead the team with me, and Dimitrija will stay," Fang Hao commanded softly. "Yes, my lord." The heroes answered in unison. Only Ma Hong was puzzled about what had happened. "Boss, what do you mean? Are you going to that empty territory?" "Yeah, we'll set off in an hour, you lead the way, and get ready. Oh! By the way, go check if the mercenaries have left. Then tell the residents not to come out tonight, Fang Hao said again. Okay. Ma Hong replied and immediately ran out. It was about half an hour later. Ma Hong ran back and said, Boss, the mercenaries have left the city. Well, don't let the villagers come out. Wait for me to come back, Fang Hao repeated. Ma Hong nodded his head in agreement. Immediately afterwards, Fang Hao took out the demon doll and directly activated the demon teleportation. Under the astonished gaze of Ma Hong, he walked directly into the curtain of light and disappeared. Fang Hao smiled faintly, ruffling her hair. 2056. We will rest after we take down the bandits' stronghold. Otherwise, I'm afraid they will run away. It will be hard to find them then. Among the heroes, only Angia followed him in. Dimitrija and Aseti were setting up their own tasks. When he opened his eyes again, he was already back in his own territory. The smooth road, the bright street lights, and a row of skeleton soldiers marched neatly by. They turned their heads in unison to look in this direction. Seeing that it was Fang Hao and Angia, they turned their heads back in unison. They didn't stop their march throughout the maneuver, only their skulls were swinging back and forth. Gather 3 bone dragons, 7 skeleton mantis, and we'll return in 1 hour, Fang Hao said to Angia. The demon teleportation consumes a large amount of magic power. It needs rest to be used again without taking the magic recovery potion. Don't we rest for the night? It's actually okay if we go back tomorrow, Angia said. Having been away for a few days, she missed home a little. Fang Hao smiled faintly, ruffling her hair. We will rest after we take down the bandits' stronghold. Otherwise, I'm afraid they will run away. It will be hard to find them then. Okay. Angia agreed and headed for the troop hiding cave outside the city. Chapter 640. Angia left, and Fang Hao quickly headed towards the Viscera Museum. He made his way into the museum. There in the lobby on the first floor, more than a dozen funeral priests were busy recording data and grinding materials. Seeing Fang Hao come in, they all bowed in unison, Lord. Fang Hao nodded, well, is Bachelor Nelson here? Although it was deep into the night, for the undead, there was no such thing as sleep. They don't suffer from disease or pain, they don't know fatigue, and they don't need to sleep. Please wait, my lord. I'll go notify Bachelor Nelson, said one of the funeral priests, heading upstairs. The overall atmosphere of the museum carried a bone-chilling coldness. No matter how hot it was outside, no one would want to come here to escape from the heat. Not too long after, footsteps sounded from the second floor. Looking up, he saw Nelson, leaning on a cane, come down. Meanwhile, following behind Nelson was another special undead. Walking down to the first floor, Nelson and the undead behind him both bowed. Nelson said, My lord, it seems you've ended your journey earlier than planned. Ah, don't even mention it. I was ambushed by a bunch of bandits halfway through my journey and suffered some casualties, Fang Hao sighed. Oh? This kind of thing can happen too? These bandits are pretty daring, Nelson said in a calm tone. He beckoned, and immediately, a funeral priest brought over 2 chairs. They were placed behind Fang Hao and Nelson. Although Nelson was not a combat hero, he was one of the earliest heroes to join the Lord's territory. Seeing that Fang Hao could fall into a bandit's ambush was indeed a rare occurrence. 2057. As they sat down, Fang Hao said, I came back this time to check on the situation here and bring back some bone dragons to exterminate these bandits. He had witnessed the gradual development of the territory. Seeing that Fang Hao could fall into a bandit's ambush was indeed a rare occurrence. As they sat down, Fang Hao said, I came back this time to check on the situation here and bring back some bone dragons to exterminate these bandits. Nelson nodded slightly. As for the territory, there are no problems. A few days ago, we got a visit from the camp of the web weavers. They said they'd been harassed by some orc bandits. I've already arranged for someone to solve this. Oh, that's good. Fang Hao had come to inquire about the state of the territory. It seemed that there were no significant issues while he was away. By the way, my lord, you can take Spencer with you to deal with the bandits. Nelson extended his hand, introducing the hero standing behind him. The hero, Spencer, stepped forward, placed one hand on his chest and slightly bowed. Honorable Lord, I am willing to be of service to you. Soul of Flame Spencer, Orange Tier 5 hero. Spencer used to be the Red Dragon. Now, he has been made into an undead hero by Nelson. However, the Spencer in front of him was noticeably different from the previous skeleton heroes. Generally, any hero that was transformed into an undead took the form of a skeleton. But the Spencer in front of him looked more like a dried corpse with muscles. There were hard curved dragon horns on his head. His body was covered with grey-white muscles. He was hairless with a strong physique. As he bowed naked, he had no reproductive organs. He looked more like a mummy that had been unwrapped. Fang Hao was seeing such an undead, different from skeletons and rotten corpses, for the first time. Ahem, ahem. I welcome your addition, Spencer, Fang Hao replied with a smile. Not only was he different from ordinary skeleton heroes, but he also inherited his former name. He still bore a prefix of hero in his own name. Thank you, my lord, Spencer straightened up and moved aside. All right, Spencer, get ready. Check if there is any equipment in the warehouse that you can use. Get ready to leave with me later. As you command, my lord, Spencer pulled off a salute to Nelson, then turned around and left the Viscera Museum. Once Spencer had left, Fang Hao, filled with curiosity, asked, is he a new type of undead? He wasn't sure how to describe it. He could only utter the word new type. Despite the unusual word choice, Nelson understood what Fang Hao meant. He replied, the physical bodies of the Dragon Clan are strong and robust. Preserving it can make Spencer's strength closer to what it was when he was alive. When living creatures become undead, although their strength is preserved, their bodies change. Also, with each creation of a skeleton hero, Nelson's skill had improved significantly. Further, after sealing the viscera of the giant spirit god last time and receiving the dark gold viscera jar, Nelson had advanced from Orange Tier 7 to Orange Tier 8. At the same time, he had learned how to create living dead. And this time, he made a living dead out of the Dragon Clan. So, undead with flesh is stronger than skeletons, Fang Hao pondered. Not necessarily, it's the case with the Dragon Clan, but the bodies of ordinary races are too weak and not suited for this method, Nelson replied. Oh. That seemed to make sense. Fang Hao casually opened the Book of Lords, checking Spencer's properties. Soul of Flame Spencer, Orange Tier 5 Hero. Faction, Undead, Living Dead. Chapter 641. Soul of Flame Spencer, Orange Tier 5 Hero. Faction, Undead, Living Dead. Template, Gold. Racial traits, Living Dead, Viscera Replacement, Light Weakness, Dragon Clan Flesh, Flight, Dragon Clan Spellcasting, Dual Forms. Legion Talent, Dragon Clan Hero, Air Commander, Fire Aura. Skills, Dragon's Might, Flame Breath, Flame Magic Usage, Firestorm. Innate Skills, Mastery of Field Combat, Mastery of Field Magic, Mastery of Field Flight. Living Dead, a corpse with flesh and viscera, more like living creatures, strength also closer to their former life. Viscera Replacement, replacing corresponding viscera as per its needs, to achieve corresponding effects. Dragon Clan Flesh, possessing the strong physique of the Dragon Clan, ranged resistance plus 25%, elemental resistance plus 50%. Flight, this unit is skillful at flying. Dragon Clan Spellcasting, this unit is a natural user of fire elemental magic, capable of casting fire elemental magic such as Fireball and Red Flame Circle without learning and mastering, possessing a strong magic learning ability. Dual Forms, this unit can freely switch between human form and dragon form. Dragon Clan Hero, this unit leads the Dragon Clan troops, all attributes plus 50%, magic resistance plus 15%. Air Commander, this unit commands flying units, flight speed plus 75%, ranged evasion plus 50%. Fire Aura, this unit commands the army, flame resistance 35%. Dragon's Might, Dragon Form, passive nearby living creatures have a 45% chance to be incapacitated due to tension, and a 90% chance to cause morale to drop by 15%. Flame Breath, Dragon Form, active furious flames form dragon breath, burning everything covered. Flame Magic, human form, passive mastery in most flame magic. Firestorm, human form, active unstable flame magic, forming a fierce firestorm, devouring everything around it. Unstable magic, prone to disintegrate and lose control. Description, the product of the immortal corpse which, not recognized by the god of undead, this hero cannot be promoted or advanced. Spencer's attributes are even stronger than imagined. People always say that the dragon clan is favored by all gods. Even if it is an orange template, its attributes and abilities are close to Rolina of the dark gold level. Strong physique, mastery of fire magic, the legendary melee mage, hey. No wonder, no race is willing to provoke the dragon clan. My lord, we have also collected dragon blood, dragon scales, and many other valuable materials from Spencer. I suggest we hire someone to make the demon dragon potion to enhance your physical strength, Nelson suggested softly. Demon dragon potion. Fang Hao closed the Book of Lords and looked back at him. The demon dragon, just by the name, you can tell the potion is special. Yes, it's a potion made with dragon blood and other special materials. It can elevate your physique to a new level. It may not reach the effect of the dragon clan, but it will be very robust. Although the territory is developing quickly, the materials collected from dragon clan bodies have not been made into finished products due to a lack of skilled personnel. Therefore, Nelson suggested turning them into demon dragon potion to enhance Fang Hao's personal strength. Fang Hao was very interested after hearing this. Increasing his own self-preservative ability is also what he needs to consider at the moment. Otherwise, no matter how many soldiers and heroes he has, if he is assassinated, everything will be in vain. And he does not want to be turned into an undead by Nelson. Even if he could be turned into a living corpse, judging by Spencer's body structure, it still lacks important organs. Do you know how to make a demon dragon potion? Nelson shook his head. I don't excel in that, but we can invite through the trade alliance an alchemist who is proficient in alchemy to make it. Of course, the price will certainly not be low. Money is not a problem. Fang Hao considered briefly. I will have to leave later, so I will have to trouble you more about this matter. Let Dujin help you. Dujin is a skeleton merchant responsible for handling business with the alliance. I can. Nelson gave a direct assent without any expression. Fang Hao and Nelson chatted casually. It was not long before Spencer returned. Unlike other skeleton heroes, Spencer did not immediately put on the cold armor but wore a dark robe inside the bright armor. A saber was hanging around his waist. Seeing Spencer coming back, Fang Hao had no intention of lingering. Scholar Nelson, I'll be taking them away first. I'll have to rely on you here. Fang Hao stood up. Hey, take care, my lord. Nelson nodded. After they left the Viscera Museum, Fang Hao led Spencer to the gathering point. Arriving at the square, it was already full of assembled skeleton soldiers. 3 bone dragons, 6 skeleton mantismen. The number is not large, but they are all unrecruitable in the barracks. At this moment, in the previously dim lord's mansion, the lights were brightly lit. Angia was sitting at the entrance eating something. Ira, leading a few maids, stood at the gate, gazing out. When she saw Fang Hao coming, Ira's expression instantly brightened, and she ran over in a hurry, throwing herself directly into Fang Hao's arms. Master, you're back. Ira said in her gentle voice. Fang Hao hugged Ira's soft body. Master, have you missed Ira? Ira lifted her head slightly from Fang Hao's chest, her eyes full of affection and longing. Chapter 642. Ah, this. Fang Hao glanced at the surrounding maids. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he said softly, I have considered, with so many people around, I am not afraid of being laughed at. Hee. Ira gave a slight smile and released her hold on his hand. She whispered a few words to Ira. Ira, finally, seemed happy. She, along with a few other maids, returned to the city lord's mansion to rest. The mansion was getting bigger and bigger. It was a bit frightening for Ira to live there alone, and so, some other maids had also moved in. On ordinary days, they were primarily responsible for the sanitation of the mansion. Ira left. Fang Hao did not continue to delay and activated the demon teleportation. A light curtain appeared, carrying a bone dragon loaded with skeleton mantises. It vanished from the spot. When it reappeared, it had returned to Mahong's territory. At this time, Mahong, swallowing hard, looked up at the tall bone dragon, and then at the horned orange hero who had just arrived. His surprise at Fang Hao had turned into fear and disbelief. How could this be possible? How many more tricks did Fang Hao have up his sleeve? Every time he thought that Fang Hao had played his biggest card to become the #1 person in the channel, Fang Hao would always reveal another trump card, each one stronger than the last. Now he had returned, bringing another orange hero and 3 fearsome undead bone dragons. This was simply madness. Soon, Dimitrija and Aseti approached one after another. "My lord, we are ready and can set off at any time," Aseti said. Fang Hao nodded and spoke to the still-dazed Mahong. "Mahong, lead us to the annexed territory under your control." "Oh, okay." Apart from the Book of Lords devouring Mahong's territory, he also had an affiliated city, but it was always deserted. The city gate opened, and in the cover of night, Fang Hao and his party left with Mahong. Aseti led the Lionheart Knights and Spencer led the Undead, following closely. The army hurriedly moved through the forest, greatly increasing their speed. After nearly an hour's journey, they finally saw the affiliated city that Mahong had mentioned. The walls of the territory were still made of raw logs, somewhat covered with vines. The gate was shabby, showing signs of an attack or failed challenge. "Boss, this is the empty territory I spoke of," Mahong explained. By now, Mahong didn't have many soldiers left. It was difficult for him to develop and manage two cities simultaneously. "All right, let's go inside." The group entered the city. Inside the city, it was empty. There were a few abandoned houses on either side and a warehouse. "Previously, I arranged for my troops to log and gather resources here, but they were often harassed by beasts. And when I heard about the life-taking bandits living in the mountains, I called back all of my troops. That's why it's been empty all this time," Mahong continued to explain. As everyone was talking and walking, they suddenly heard a strange noise coming from one of the dilapidated houses. Everyone immediately became alert. Then, they saw a few wild deer bolting out of the house and running wildly about the city. Fang Hao ordered the army to make way, allowing the deer to escape the city. The presence of animals living here signified that there wasn't any immediate danger. They went straight to the single-story city lord's mansion. It was a level 3 city lord's mansion, very simple, with no decent furniture inside. Fang Hao didn't hesitate. He directly opened the Book of Lords and began the transformation to an undead camp. "Do you want to switch the camp of this city?" Hence, humans were not shown as an option for conversion. Undead camp. A beam of light enshrouded the entire city. Transformation complete. Next transformation countdown, 29 days 59 hours. The light dissipated. This territory had been transformed into the undead camp. After the success, Fang Hao left the city again. He began to construct military buildings. Level 1 burial grounds, required resources, 300 wood, 500 stone, 60 hemp ropes. The first level of the barracks blueprints was not very demanding. Fang Hao chose to construct. Within a flash of light, the construction of the barracks was completed. To upgrade the barracks, Fang Hao would need to upgrade the city lord's mansion first. Since it was only for temporary use, and it was uncertain whether this place would be useful after cleaning the bandits' hideout, he decided to upgrade the city lord's mansion to level 5, and with it, the barracks were also upgraded to level 5. The level 5 burial grounds had unlocked the skeleton spearmen. Moreover, the rank of the skeleton troops had increased to level 2. If continued to be upgraded, both the city lord's mansion and the burial grounds would need a large number of rare materials. It seemed quite wasteful. After considering all these, Fang Hao directly recruited troops. Hundredfold bonus triggered, recruiting skeleton warriors 50500. Hundredfold bonus triggered, recruiting skeleton spearmen 50500. Whoosh! A sound of bone friction echoed. The city, which was already compact, was now crammed with skeleton troops on the rooftops and city walls. "Spencer, you lead these skeletons out to wait while I make their equipment," Fang Hao said. "Yes, my lord," Spencer replied. He immediately gave orders and led all the skeletons out of the city. When the skeletons had left, Fang Hao continued to create equipment on the vacant land. Armor, black iron knight swords, military round shields, and military spears. A large number of these appeared in front of him. The Lionheart Knights, in batches, led the skeleton soldiers to put on their gear. While this was happening, Fang Hao was briefing Spencer. "Spencer, this is the map of the bandits' hiding place. You set off tonight to round up and attack the bandits," Fang Hao instructed, handing the marked map, provided by the captive bandits, to Spencer. Chapter 643. "Understood, sir. Do we accept surrender in this battle?" Spencer asked again. Fang Hao pondered a bit. The northern mines indeed lacked labor power. They might indeed be useful. Depends on the situation. If it's controllable, accept the surrender. If it isn't, handle it as you see fit. Oh, and try not to harm the common villagers who have been plundered by these bandits. Understood, sir. I guarantee to complete the task. Spencer immediately replied. All right, I leave the rest to you. In no time, all the skeleton soldiers were fully armed. After exchanging a few words with Fang Hao, Spencer led the 10,000 skeleton army towards the bandit camp. In the mountains, bone dragons circled in the sky, and the skeleton army roamed between the trees. When everything was done, Fang Hao ordered to block the city gates. The party only then returned to Mahong City. The next day dawned. As the weak morning light shone into the room through the window, Fang Hao had already awakened from his sleep. He patted his thigh on his waist and whispered, "Angia, wake up." Angia muttered something that seemed like a curse under her breath. Then she rolled over to the other side and continued sleeping. Fang Hao sat up from the bed, stretched lazily, and then got out of bed. He said, "Sleep for a while longer, I'll wake you up later." Angia waved her hand, indicating him to leave first. After a brief wash, Fang Hao left the room. Outside the door, he saw Mahong preparing breakfast for the militia. "Boss, you're awake. Breakfast will be ready soon, it won't delay our actions for today," Mahong said enthusiastically. After the Book of Lords was swallowed by Fang Hao, and in the channel, there were quite a few night owls. Mahong chatted with them and got to know some things about the domain. At the same time, he had thought through many things overnight. He had considered joining Li Zhenhu's alliance before. Now joining Fang Hao's, it seemed he didn't lose out. Besides, Fang Hao had a good character and his strength was beyond his imagination. He actually got a great deal. After he thought it through, his attitude had changed drastically. No longer aimlessly executing Fang Hao's orders, but instead, he started to think about what he could do for the next actions. He had been thinking about this issue all night long, not sleeping. When the sky began to lighten, he had already left his dwelling and was directing his subordinates to prepare breakfast. "You woke up so early?" Fang Hao said with a smile. "Hehe, I had some insomnia last night, so I got up early today." Mahong scratched his head and said, I want to share some blueprints of human buildings with you. First, build the barracks. We'll need it later." Fang Hao opened the Book of Lords and shared the blueprints of Heavy Sword Infantry Training Camp, Lionheart Knight Training Camp, Storm Crossbowman Training Camp, Distributed Underground Pipeline, Spiritual Field, Beast Cage, and others with Mahong. Mahong stayed where he was, looking at the prompts unlocking new blueprints. His eyes stared blankly, his mouth wide open. This impact was not less than seeing the bone dragon last night. Damn it! Indeed, riding someone's coattails is the fastest way to develop. All the hard work he had done his whole life, all the crying and shouting, didn't amount to the number and quality of blueprints he got today. When the prompts for unlocking blueprints stopped, Mahong came back to his senses. "Boss, wait for me, I'll start building now." After saying that, he bolted out. He headed towards the barracks area to build the newly unlocked barracks blueprints. One after another, special barracks sprung up, and Mahong's heart was filled with joy. "I don't need to be the best, I just need to be better than most people." Looking at the rising light from the buildings, Mahong clenched his fists and said. Indeed, with these few buildings, he wouldn't be the top guy, but he had definitely surpassed most people. Just by following Fang Hao around, he could live decently off the leftovers. The construction of high-level buildings took a long time. Mahong didn't go to eat but watched blankly as the construction progressed bit by bit, waiting for it to complete. Breakfast was simple. Porridge and some smoked meat. Everyone gathered on the open space in front of the Lord's mansion, wolfing down their food. Fang Hao had just announced that they were all about to set off to attack the Life-Taker's stronghold. No one said much. They just ate quietly, replenishing their energy. "Boss, the barracks are built." Mahong came back. Fang Hao nodded, "Give me all your soul crystals, I'll recruit some soldiers." "Okay." Mahong immediately brought out his soul crystals. He had few soul crystals, so Fang Hao also asked for some from Zhang Bin, Fu Lei and others. Feeling that the quantity was about right, he headed towards the barracks. Chapter 644. Mahong was taking the lead, and Fang Hao was following closely behind with several heroes. The group quickly arrived at the barracks where Fang Hao began recruitment. Hundredfold enhancement triggered, recruiting 505 heavy sword infantry. Hundredfold enhancement triggered, recruiting 505 Lionheart Knights. There were flashes of light everywhere. Over 1,000 soldiers appeared on one side of the barracks. Fang Hao didn't put much thought into recruiting these soldiers. It was meant to avoid any further danger, and to compensate for the losses suffered by the Lyss city forces. After all, many people had been injured. They were no longer suitable to journey along with the army. The soldiers lined up according to their units. Fang Hao continued providing the newly recruited soldiers with their corresponding equipment. He let the heroes each take command and handle equipment changes. Once everything was prepared, the mercenaries were also ready. The total number was more than 1,700. Ma Hong, you are to stay here, and the injured will stay with you. I will keep you informed if anything happens. Fang Hao patted Ma Hong's shoulder. What? I'm not going with you? I also have many men. By now, Ma Hong had also counted his men. He had even made his pre-war speech to his civilian soldiers. Everyone was ready for battle, but now he was tasked with staying home. We still need you to hold down the fort here, take good care of this place. Fang Hao continued. Well, all right. Ma Hong reluctantly responded. He was hoping to join in fighting the bandits too. However, he was assigned guard duty at home. But then again, this was also good, there was no danger. The soldiers sprang into action. An impressive force left the city, heading south. 2 days later, at noon. The scorching midday autumn sun was like a steamer, with not a breeze in sight. A large black dog lay on the ground panting heavily, a rooster in a cage also dropped its head, appearing sick and on the verge of death. This made the already worried bandits even more irritable. In a shaded area under a wall, a few bandits leaned against the wall, whispering to each other. Damn, why is it so hot at noon, even hotter than summer? In half a month, it's going to be cool, and you'll be missing this warmth. A young bandit lowered his voice and asked, is the lady really as powerful as they say, capable of calling in an army to fight us? Does a woman have so much power? The mention of this caused the group to move closer together instinctively. You haven't heard the name Rebecca before? One of them asked. I've heard that she's attractive and is the wife of Lyss City's city lord, but that's all I know. The young bandit continued. Think about it, a woman who can firmly hold onto a city. Every person who maintains power does so by stepping over corpses. Do you think a woman like that, who survived death, will come back to seek revenge on us? Another bandit explained. Really? Can she be that powerful? The young bandit appeared doubtful. Humph. Judge for yourself, the 3 bosses. Since the day before yesterday, have you seen them fooling around with women or drinking? They are probably worried too, said the seasoned bandit. So, isn't the camp in danger? The young bandit asked anxiously. The seasoned bandit calmly replied, don't be hasty. Lyss is a big city, even raising an army isn't an easy task. Now that all cities are preparing for winter, I guess even if there's going to be a war, it won't be until spring next year. Boss, you're very knowledgeable. The young bandit said admiringly. Regardless of whether he was right or wrong, he already surpassed most of the bandits by speaking such words. At that moment, a door nearby opened. A man, naked and scarred all over, walked out. Upon seeing the naked man, several men quickly got up, smiling obsequiously. Third boss, it's hot. Let me shade you. 2103. Oh, all right. The bandits sprang into action, quickly. The seasoned bandit and the young one entered the house together, joined forces to lift a huge wooden box, and walked away. As they were moving, the sound of clanging gold coins could be heard from inside the box. At this, the expression of the seasoned bandit changed and he quickly scanned the surroundings. Noticing no one was paying attention, he rapidly lifted a small crack in the wooden lid of the box. Golden coins shone from inside the box. The young man on the other side also saw the gold coins and a surprised look flashed across his face. After a single glance, the box was immediately closed again. The box was carried onto the carriage. The seasoned bandit quickly ordered, you guys go and find some rope to secure the boxes, go to the cellar to get 2 jars of fruit wine, hurry up. The third boss always takes care of you guys. Li Zhenhu, who was absent-minded, thought of the seasoned bandit as very considerate. You're not bad. When we return tonight, I'll tell the big boss to assign you a better task. Li Zhenhu patted the bandit's shoulder. With a sycophantic smile, the seasoned bandit replied, whatever you say, boss. To be able to follow you definitely means a good deal. Haha, you know how to speak. The seasoned bandit continued, third boss, what big business are you going to do this time? Chapter 645. Li Zhenhu's face was instantly covered with a look of worry. The old bandit thought he had misspoken and was about to apologize. But then Li Zhenhu said, go buy more lives, damn it, all this time has been wasted. At this moment, the boxes on the horse carriage had been securely tied. Li Zhenhu, leading his soldiers, escorted the horse carriage out of the bandits' den. They headed towards the south. The old bandit stood in place, watching as Li Zhenhu and his men vanished into the distance. After a long pause, he muttered to himself, maybe we won't be able to live past the next spring. Night fell. Spencer stood on the back of the dragon, looking down at the brightly lit bandits' hideout. In the daytime, the hideout in the forest was not easy to find. But at night, the hideout stood out like a beacon. Go, let's go back. The bone dragon turned around to fly back. Upon landing, it settled directly in the forest. A dense mob of skeletons, like statues, stood straight up in the gaps of the dense forest. Advance, ordered Spencer. Bang, bang, bang. The skeleton soldiers began to move. The ground started shaking as the wave of white bones advanced forward. Inside the bandits' hideout, the tyrant sat in his chair, his face still somewhat gloomy. In a cold voice, he said, why am I feeling so uneasy? It can't be because Lyss City is making any moves. Big brother, you're just worrying too much. You think it's like a simple fight between several people? Even if Rebecca calls together an army, it won't be this fast. You're just too anxious. There are a few good-looking girls in the dungeon, do you want me to call them over so you can relax a bit? Greedy Wolf said, trying to console him. 2104. Ah! Why did we suffer such a setback this year? The third brother took the money to Jin Master this time, I wonder if he can buy us a way out. The tyrant was still full of worries. Greedy Wolf continued to comfort him, he definitely can. We just need to have those nobles delay Rebecca, we only need to worry about Fang Hao, the transmigrator mentioned by the third brother, and make sure he doesn't outsmart us. Humph! A transmigrator, no matter how strong he is, even if he encountered some adventures, they won't be able to participate in battles with thousands of people. What we should worry about is Rebecca's army, the tyrant continued. Big brother, you're right. Greedy Wolf was cut off as he suddenly looked down at his cup of wine. He saw ripples spreading rhythmically across the surface of the wine. This sudden occurrence made both men uneasy. Just as they were about to inquire further, they heard the ringing of a loud bell from outside. At the same time, they heard footsteps outside the door. A man outside the door said, bosses, all 4 perimeter bases have sounded the bell. Hearing this news, the tyrant and Greedy Wolf instantly stood up. That was too fast. How could it be so fast? It was just a few days ago that they attacked Rebecca's team. How could an army be dispatched from Lyss City in such a short time? But reality was unfolding before them, leaving no time for these speculations. As the two of them were donning their armor and grabbing their weapons, they walked briskly out the door. The tyrant coldly ordered, gather our forces immediately and prepare to reinforce the other hideouts. Yes, boss. Just as the bandit was about to leave, the bell at the main base immediately rang. Someone was shouting, watch out for the sky, there's a dragon approaching. A dragon? What dragon? How could such a creature from the tales appear here? Everyone looked up at the sky together, only to see several enormous creatures dive down in the night sky. The target was them. In an instant, everyone was stunned. In the sky, Spencer, in his dragon form, led the 3 bone dragons. Breaking through the clouds, they dove straight down towards the bandits' hideout. The hideout was in complete chaos, with panicking bandits running around like headless flies. Spencer glanced back at the bone dragons behind him. He lowered his altitude, and when he was at a certain height from the ground, roar! The huge dragon's mouth opened, and a blazing dragon breath spewed forth. It swept through below. There was no pain nor screams to be heard. Everything engulfed by the flames turned to ashes in an instant. The horse carriages, the bandits, everything was reduced to ashes within the flames. Following Spencer's lead, the 3 bone dragons did the same. 3 breaths of death swept across the fleeing crowd. In the midst of wretched screams, flesh and skin started to separate, eventually turning into several piles of white bones scattered on the ground. Whoosh! Immediately after, 6 skeletons fell from the sky, each holding a Valkyrie longsword. The skeleton mantismen, bearing the Valkyrie longsword, landed smoothly on the ground. In their hollow eye sockets, a hint of soul fire flickered. After swiftly scanning the surroundings, whoosh, 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 they turned into streaks of light and charged towards all the weapon-wielding enemies. The 3 bone dragons circled overhead, intermittently shooting black columns of light where crowds were gathered. Spencer's massive dragon body hovered slight above the ground. After transforming back into a humanoid form, he landed gracefully. Naked, with only a long sword in his hand. He quickly scanned the wailing bandits' hideout, and finally set his sights on the stone tower in the center. At the same time, startled eyes that were peeking out of the stone tower quickly retracted. Spencer marched directly towards the stone tower. Bang! Bang! Just as he approached the stone tower, a couple of crossbow bolts were shot out from the windows. They were heading directly towards Spencer's chest. Chapter 646. With a sweep of his longsword, Spencer deflected the crossbow bolts and with his left hand, he conjured magic in mid-air. Fireballs shot out like a string of pearls, heading towards every window. Bang! 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 The fireballs exploded, sparks flying off in all directions. It immediately went quiet in the stone house. No more crossbow bolts were shot from the windows, nor did anyone dare to show themselves. Creak! Spencer pushed open the door and walked in with big strides. The decoration inside the stone tower was tolerable, just that some black scorch marks were apparent near the windows. At the staircase location of the stone tower, 7 bandits were nervously gripping their weapons, their eyes fixated on Spencer. What the hell are you? How dare you step foot on human territory, aren't you afraid of starting a race war? Roared the tyrant hiding behind his subordinates. A creature that looked somewhat human, but not quite. It made their hearts tremble. Spencer paused before asking curiously, aren't you bandits? Don't you cause wars? The tyrant did not respond. Greedy Wolf, however, took the initiative and spoke up, Sir, what would it take for you to spare us? Just name your terms, we will comply. Yes, yes, what do you want to spare us? Echoed the tyrant. Spencer looked at them and the 5 trembling bandits before them. His tone was still calm, those who drop their weapons and surrender shall be spared. Damn it, you're toying with us. Do you really think we're scared of you? Boys, let's kill him. The tyrant roared. The 5 men in front of him were his trusted followers. They were one of the earliest members of the bandits, possessing a fondness for murder. Hearing their boss command, and despite their fear, they gritted their teeth, raised their weapons, and attacked the odd creature before them. Bang! A blast of fire exploded amidst the bandits. The 5 followers' bodies flew backward instantly, their whole bodies charred black. When they landed, their bodies broke apart like charred wood. Clang! Clang! With a crisp sound, the attacking tyrant and greedy wolf abruptly halted their advances. Almost in unison, they dropped their weapons and dropped to their knees. We are unarmed, we surrender. But when the bandits heard the rest of the strongholds also ringing their alarm bells, they realized that all the strongholds were under attack simultaneously. 2106. Having been leaders for so many years, they had some strategic sense. The man before them, who looked like a peeled corpse, was clearly at the level of a high-ranking hero. At this point, continuing to hold their weapons was a death wish. Seeing their surrender, Spencer dissipated the amassed energy. Then follow me out, Spencer said softly. The 2 dared not disobey and obediently followed Spencer out. Outside, the whole camp was in chaos. Yelling, crying, pleas for mercy, echoed in every corner. The figure of the skeleton mantis didn't stop moving, dealing with the bandits who were still trying to fight back. As the night wore on, the sounds of fighting gradually faded, and the battle was nearing its end. Boom! 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 The 4 small strongholds guarding the main one continued to ring their bells without pause, calling for support from the other strongholds. But when the bandits heard the rest of the strongholds also ringing their alarm bells, they realized that all the strongholds were under attack simultaneously. Captain, how are we supposed to fight this? "There are too many of them," stammered a bandit on the city wall. Endless undead burst out from between the trees, still charging towards the stronghold with their weapons. The captain's trembling legs were not much better than his own. After hearing their pleas, the captain finally came back to his senses. He shouted, "Shoot, shoot arrows, why are you asking me?" The bandits began to fire arrows. But the damage they inflicted on the undead was minimal. When the swarms of skeletons had reached the city wall, the 3-meter-high stronghold was instantly covered by the undead. The city gate was wide open, and even more skeletons rushed in, killing the despairing bandits. Chapter 647. Elsewhere. In a valley southeast of the Life-Takers bandit camp, a middle-aged man dressed in leather armor, a longbow slung over his shoulder and a dagger tucked at his waist, swiftly enters the dark valley. After passing the hidden sentry, he stands before a cave and quietly calls out, "My lord. What new information do you have?" A female voice echoes from within the cave. The tone is crisp, indicating that the woman is evidently young. "My lord, as night fell, those guys' camp was attacked by the undead. It's total chaos there now," the middle-aged man reports quietly. "The undead? Where did so many of them come from in this area?" The woman's voice is full of astonishment. She doesn't doubt her subordinate. She just finds it unusual since her territory is right here and she has never heard or seen anything about the presence of the undead. The word undead is something she came across in a conversation with others. "My lord, I saw it with my own eyes, those skeletons randomly crawled out and initiated the attack on the camp as if they've gone mad. I suspect those guys must have done something heinous to incite the wrath of the undead," the middle-aged man continues to answer. "Oh. Is the camp destroyed? Is Li Zhenhu dead?" The woman's ability to process information is really high. Her tone suddenly turns somewhat gleeful. "There are a lot of undead, they are likely to engage in a fatal stalemate. I didn't get a glimpse of Li Zhenhu, so I don't know if he's dead or not," the man answers every question posed by the woman. Thump thump thump. Footsteps can be heard. A petite figure emerges from the depths of the dark cave. Standing before the cave, she contemplates for a moment before saying, "Notify our brothers, tomorrow morning we will attack the Life-Takers bandit camp and slaughter those damned beasts." "Yes, my lord." The middle-aged man responds in a low voice, heading towards the side of the valley. The woman steps out of the cave, puts her fingers to her mouth and whistles. Suddenly, there are sounds of animal roars echoing throughout the surrounding forest. As if responding to the woman. In the moonlight, her delicate facial features are highlighted. She grits her teeth and says, "Li Zhenhu, this time I'll skin you alive." The next day at dawn. It's dawn. What used to be a bustling Life-Takers bandit camp now lies deathly still. In front of the Lord's residence, hundreds of surrendered bandits kneel on the ground, not daring to raise their heads. Circle after circle of undead surround them, standing like statues, staring at the people in the middle. And these bandits, who used to be murderous and fearsome, now resemble docile rabbits. They kneel there quietly, not daring to make any moves all night. Out of the thousands in the camp, only these few are left. They don't know how long they have to kneel, yet they can only continue to do so. Noon. A group of people approaches the bandit camp from the main road to the north. Expecting a tough battle, the mercenaries had handed their last wills, addressed to the injured companions left behind in the city, before leaving. But as they approach the camp, everything is silent. The city walls are filled with arrows and traces of blood flowing downwards are still fresh. One can imagine that a fierce battle must have taken place here just a few hours ago. Yet, despite the intense fighting, not a single corpse can be seen inside or outside the city walls. It's as if this place is a ghost city. A city that is bleeding. There is a strange atmosphere all around. "Sir, madam, there might be danger here, we should send someone to do a reconnaissance first," a mercenary brigade leader suggests as he quickly approaches. Another brigade leader agrees, "Yes, since we're here, we should be careful." Several brigade leaders propose a reconnaissance. Rashly barging in could incite unknown dangers. Fang Hao thinks for a bit, deciding that a few more minutes doesn't matter. He quietly orders, "Scouts, go and check out the situation inside the bandit camp." "Yes, sir." The group is already at the city, right in front of a small-scale camp. As the scouts reach the city following their orders, they vigilantly walk through the open gate. Not long after, the scouts return, their faces are full of bewilderment. They report, "Sir, it's an empty city. There are signs of a fierce battle, but there's not a single person inside, it's empty. How can this be? A brigade leader exclaims in surprise. Fang Hao seems calm in comparison. He softly commands, the guards of Lyss city and the 4 mercenary brigades will head to the 4 minor camps and look for spoils of war. The rest of you will accompany me to the main camp in the center. Yes. Everyone responds, and the people from the 4 mercenary brigades split off and start heading towards the 4 smaller camps. The guards of Lyss city mix into the mercenary brigades, serving as supervisors. Of course, these small camps don't have much spoils of war. The good stuff has already been plundered by the 3 bandit leaders and stashed in the main camp. The reason for this arrangement is to keep them busy and away from the center. After receiving their orders, Fang Hao leads his men to the main camp. As they approach, they see the undead soldiers standing guard at the camp. All's going well. The group enters the camp, the Lionheart Knights and heavily armed infantry take over the job from the undead. They begin to stand guard. Lord, the camp has been successfully occupied, there are 772 captured bandits. We can confirm that the 2 men are indeed the tyrant and the greedy wolf. Spencer follows closely behind Fang Hao, softly providing his report. Chapter 648. Oh? What about Li Zhenhu? Fang Hao inquired. He was more interested in the local dwellers who were originally mountain bandits. Fang Hao was more concerned about Li Zhenhu, who had been fishing to harm the transmigrator. This man's scheming and ruthlessness was ultimately trouble if he was not dead. Li Zhenhu was not among the captives, nor was there a body with physical features resembling him. He may not have been in the village at the time, or he might have fled during the battle, Spencer reported calmly. Fang Hao walked into the main hall and sat in a chair. He gently stroked the armrests of the chair. He softly said, Angia, lead a team to rummage through the village and collect anything of value. Dimitrija, you take over the city's defense. Aseti, lead the cavalry to scout the surroundings. Spencer, have someone bring the tyrant and greedy wolf here. Yes. The heroes all took their leave of the room. Shortly afterward, Spencer brought 2 men into the room. It was clear that both men were strong, but their faces were somewhat pale at this moment. When they entered, their eyes shifted nervously around the room. Upon seeing the young man above, their brows furrowed. With their way of thinking, they couldn't understand what the young man above had to do with the undead who attacked their village last night. Sir, the people you asked for are here, Spencer whispered. Fang Hao nodded, his gaze falling on the 2 men. I heard you guys have done a lot of terrible things. Did you ever think this day would come? Fang Hao stared directly at them. The tyrant and greedy wolf frowned at the young man above them. They were certain that this was a transmigrator. Sir, we didn't mean any harm to you, the tyrant said loud, his mouth dry. They knew that their survival hinged on the man in front of them having the final say. To live, being tough would not be a wise choice. My name is Fang Hao. A few days ago, you ambushed me, Fang Hao said flatly. Fang Hao? The 2 men looked bewildered once more. Then, their expressions quickly changed from confusion to surprise. They remembered this name. Li Zhenhu had mentioned an individual named Fang Hao, a transmigrator who had a significant connection to Lyss city. Back then, they didn't pay much attention to it. But looking at him now, it wasn't Rebecca who was the most terrifying, but this harmless-looking transmigrator in front of them. Seeing their expressions, Fang Hao was surprised. Oh? Have you 2 heard about me before? No, they quickly shook their heads. All right, then. Do you know where Li Zhenhu went? Where is he? Fang Hao continued asking. The 2 looked at each other. Greedy Wolf answered, Li Zhenhu was not in the camp. He went to Jinmastu. Lying is not a wise choice. At this point, he still dares to leave. Fang Hao's tone instantly turned cold. Greedy Wolf flinched and hurried to explain, I didn't lie to you. We feared Lyss city's siege, so we sent Li Zhenhu with our money to Jinmastu to buy our way out. That's why he wasn't in the city. He went to Jinmastu? What a coincidence. How many days ago did he leave, and who did he find to buy his salvation? Fang Hao continued to press on. Greedy Wolf responded, Li Zhenhu said he had contacts who could get in touch with the city lord of Jinmastu to give us legitimate identities. In that case, Rebecca would have no reason to attack us. How much money did he take? Almost all of it. He took away everything we had saved up over the years, Greedy Wolf stated. Fang Hao looked at the two men somewhat strangely. Considering Li Zhenhu's cunning and ruthlessness, there was a good chance that he had fled with the money. Maybe he settled down in Jinmasta with a new identity, or maybe he ran off and disappeared entirely. 2109. But one thing was almost certain: he was not coming back. Maybe he settled down in Jinmasta with a new identity, or maybe he ran off and disappeared entirely. But one thing was almost certain: he was not coming back. Putting aside the matter of Li Zhenhu, Fang Hao continued, "Why did you attack the Lyss city troop?" Their eyes darted around. After a moment's hesitation, they said, "We mistook them for a regular merchant convoy by mistake." Ha! Fang Hao scoffed coldly and reminded them, "Oh? That's different from what I've heard. I understand that you guys were spying on the movements of Lyss city's force half a month ago. Who told you to capture Rebecca? Don't be hasty to reply. You only have one chance to answer. If you answer poorly, you will lose your life. Think carefully before you speak." Once again, their expressions changed. They knew that if they let the man in front of them catch them in a lie again, they would likely lose their lives for sure. Beads of sweat started to form on their foreheads, dropping on the carpet one by one. Greedy Wolf gritted his teeth and said, "It was a steward from the Marshall household who found us and told us to capture Rebecca." The Marshall family? Fang Hao carefully recalled, and found in his memory the information about the Marshall family. Grote Marshall, after coming to Lyss city, began pursuing Rebecca after her husband died, forcing a proposal on her. Yet before he could finish, he was knocked out by a SETI. So it seems the whole incident has something to do with him. What promises did the Marshall family make to you? Fang Hao continued to ask. A new identity, and a city recognized by the Federation. The tyrant added. Wow, this Marshall family really knows how to wield their power. They could able to cleanse the identity of a mountain bandit to become federally recognized. From mountain bandit leader, directly to a city lord. I know what I want to know, no more need to talk to them. Take both of them away. Some soldiers came forward to escort the two away. Greedy Wolf also quickly echoed, yes, we are willing to compensate. Fang Hao asked, what can you give me? Money, how about that? You can take all the money in the warehouse, the tyrant replied directly. If I kill you guys, that money is still mine anyway. You're giving me my own money as a form of compensation, isn't that too insincere? Fang Hao refuted. This. The duo's words were halted in an instant, dumbfoundedly kneeling there. Our money is his? What else can you offer? Fang Hao continued to ask. The two thought, and the tyrant said, Sir, we can rob for you. All the money we rob will be yours. Crafty fellows, thinking big. Fang Hao waved his hand, indicating to take them away. He was too lazy to deal with them further. As the two were taken away, the tyrant was still shouting, we also have people, slaves can be sold for a lot of money, we can help you catch. The sound gradually faded and eventually disappeared. Silence returned to the hall. Fang Hao then checked the prompt that had appeared from the Book of Lords. The architectural style of this mountain village is similar to the ones built by transmigrators. However, upon sitting on the treasure middle seat, a system prompt still appeared. Life Taker Mountain Stronghold has become your subsidiary city. You can rename the city here, and control all resources of the stronghold and its subordinate villages. With the appearance of this prompt, it signified that this place belonged to the native city. And it's not a city of a transmigrator. Fang Hao thought about it, didn't have a good name, so for now, he just left it as it is. He can rename it whenever he thinks of a better name. Life Taker Mountain Stronghold. City level, 5th level original city. Attributes, combat power plus 5%, extra plundering plus 2%. Description, a city with attributes could provide various benefits to hasten the city's construction and development. The attributes for a 5th level city are just too disappointing. No extra benefits for gathering resources or a tax increase, all that exists is extra plundering, fitting for a bandit style indeed. Unlocked blueprint, bandit tent building blueprint. Bandit tent, greenstone 800, wood 1200, hemp rope 500, beast skin 50. Description, can recruit refugees and bandits into well-trained bandits. It's a blueprint for recruiting bandits. It could convert refugees into bandits, thereby increasing the stronghold's combat power. But for someone of Fang Hao's strength, this blueprint basically has no use. Population is also a vital resource. Who would foolishly convert them into bandits? Just finished reading this when the door was pushed open with a loud bang. Angia strode in, originally thinking that she had returned from scouring for spoils of war. But then I heard Angia standing at the door, shouting, "Fang Hao, come out for a moment, we found a lot of women and children in the dungeon." Women and children? Fang Hao frowned, quickly walked out. Take me to see. Chapter 649. Take me there to see. This way. Angia said, turning her head and walking to one side. A group of people followed behind the two and arrived at the west side of the mountain stronghold. At this time, there were already several soldiers standing guard here. Open it. Angia instructed. The soldier bent down and flipped open the wooden cover on the ground, revealing a dark tunnel. Angia did not pause, she walked straight down into it. Fang Hao followed behind her, joining her in the descent. As soon as they stepped in, a cold, damp smell, accompanied by a rotten stench filled the air. They could even hear the squeaking sounds of rodents. However, they heard no human voices as Angia had mentioned. The staircase down was not long, they reached the bottom after 5 or 6 steps. As soon as they got down, Fang Hao's brow furrowed again. The sunlight pouring through the entrance illuminated the place a bit. Below, wooden fences were used to divide individual cages. Inside the cages were women, dressed in tattered clothes, covered in mud. They cowered like frightened animals in the corner of the cage, backs toward the outside, shivering uncontrollably. At the edge of the cage, there was something resembling a manger. Inside it was food that was black and emitting a strange smell. Fang Hao's face immediately turned ugly. But he did not say anything, he continued to follow Angia further in. In addition to the women, he also saw children of young age, hiding together with faces full of fear. Since arriving in this world, Fang Hao had witnessed its cruelty. But seeing the situation here still left a lump in his throat, making it hard for him to breathe. Suddenly, Fang Hao noticed several women huddled together. They kept glancing over in fear, their eyes darting back and forth. It seemed as if they were trying to block Fang Hao's and others' view. "Spread out," Fang Hao softly commanded. The huddled women looked terrified, yet they only unconsciously stepped back 2 paces before stepping forward again. This only affirmed Fang Hao's suspicion that they were hiding something. "Move them aside." Several heavy infantry soldiers pulled the huddled women away. Now that the view was no longer blocked, Fang Hao saw a woman lying on the ground. Her hair was coarse like straw, and her face was sickly pale. A transmigrator. Her clothes were open, revealing a somewhat withered chest, nursing the baby in her arms. Clearly, her condition was not good. She was mechanically patting the child in her arms with vacant eyes. If this continued, she likely would not survive much longer. "Please, spare her, she just had a baby. Please, spare her." A chorus of pleas filled the dungeon. Along with the pleas, cries of children could be heard from the cage where they were locked up. Fang Hao exhaled slowly, stepping towards the woman on the ground. The pleas around him turned to curses, filled with venomous words, against these unexpected visitors. Fang Hao squatted down, letting the woman lean against him. He opened a bottle of healing potion and poured it into the woman's mouth. Cough cough. Violent coughing brought some life back into the woman's eyes. She looked at Fang Hao but did not speak. "I'm Fang Hao, you're safe now, Li Zhenhu and his men have been defeated, you and your child are safe." 2137. Fang Hao said softly. The woman did not say anything, her hand continued to pat the child in her arms. It was unclear whether she heard what Fang Hao said. At this time, the dungeon had quieted down, and everyone seemed to realize, perhaps this man wasn't with the bandits. Every single one of them was looking at Fang Hao, their previously dull eyes now sparked with a kind of light. As though they have seen a glimmer of hope. "Go, take some men to register everyone, ask for the names of their villages, after registering, take everyone out and prepare food." Fang Hao instructed softly. "All right." Angia responded. Angia could barely read and write, but the soldiers she had recruited all had some basic education. One of the racial features included learning. Carrying out registration was entirely within their capabilities. Once he had given his instructions, Fang Hao carried the woman with the black hair and baby out. He had them settled in a room. Fang Hao had constructed a troop hiding cave outside the mountain stronghold. He had Spencer place all the undead soldiers within the cave. As for Spencer himself, he had put on a suit of armor that covered his entire body. Unless someone from the Church of Light was present, no one would be able to tell that he was an undead from his appearance. After all, his entire body was still fleshy, not as obvious as a skeleton. Clip clop clip clop. At this moment, a trusted aide rode up on a horse. He spoke loudly, "City Lord, Madam wants to know your plans next." The guards of Lyss City referred to Fang Hao as the City Lord and Rebecca as Madam. Fang Hao said, "We will rest here for the night, then continue our journey tomorrow." "Yes, City Lord." The trusted aide responded, then turned to leave. Soon enough, a delicious aroma filled the mountain stronghold. It was the smell of meat porridge. Many ingredients were added to it, making the aroma even richer. It spread throughout the stronghold. Not far off, Angia had completed the registration. She led a group of women and children out of the dungeon. But when they emerged under the glaring sunlight, everyone seemed a bit dazed. Chapter 650. They even seemed a little uncomfortable. They were carefully trailing behind Angia. When they saw bandits kneeling down not far away, their faces instantly changed, showing panic. They prepared to flee back to their dungeon. The brutality of the bandits had clearly left them psychologically scarred. Angia and the soldiers, after several reassurances, the women and children finally calmed down, and began to line up for porridge and food. After getting their food, they just found a place to squat down, disregarding the dirt on their hands, and started to gulp down the porridge. They seemed to be starved half to death. Angia walked over. There are 242 women, all fairly young, and 75 children aged between 3 to 10 years old. All these people were captured from different regions by the bandits, and not yet sold. In this world, most people would start families at the age of 12 or 13. So, they matured early as well. Why are there only women and children? Where are the men? Fang Hao curiously asked. Apparently, the men who were unwilling to join the bandits were either killed or sold off as laborers. None of them were kept here. Angia explained. In fact, compared to women and children, men were incarcerated for a longer time and there were certain risks involved. The bandits probably feared trouble, so they sold off the men as quickly as possible. Fang Hao nodded to show his understanding. What do you plan to do with these people? Angia asked further. Actually, this was also a vexing issue for Fang Hao. These people were women and children, incapable of following his troops on a long journey. If we can't, we will let Ma Hong carry these people to his territory. There will always be a way to deal with it. Fang Hao suggested. That's a good idea. It would be busier and leavier if we bring them back to our place. Angia glanced at the crowd, who were wolfing down their food. Ordinary people won't be able to handle the situation over there. Fang Hao outrightly rejected this idea. Having necromantic beings everywhere was not something ordinary people could accept. When Angia first arrived in the city, she was unnerved. Several rabbit maids even fainted out of fear, not to mention these ordinary people. Looking around, the people who had gone out, had eaten roughly enough. Fang Hao knew it was also time for him to take the stage. Hopefully these people, once they are settled, could bolster his power of faith. Fang Hao walked to the front of the people and stood on a chair. Seeing that the crowd was still a bit unruly, he signaled to Angia at his side. The latter looked back, eyes blinking, full of question marks. With no other choice, Fang Hao softly spoke to Spencer on his side, "Make them quiet." Spencer nodded and yelled, "Everyone stay quiet. Our great lord, who defeated the Life-Taker bandits and saved you all, Master Fang Hao, has something to say. Be quiet." His voice was so loud that it immediately drowned out all the noise. The crowd immediately fell silent and their gaze focused unanimously on the young man standing on the chair. Ahem. Let me introduce myself, my name is Fang Hao. I come from Zeus City, north of Lyss City. I heard that there was a band of bandits here, pillaging villages, murdering innocent people, and seeing decent villagers as mere goods for sale. Upon such references, whimpers suddenly come from below. Tears streamed down one face after another, everyone bowing their heads. The women who had been kept until now were all young in age. Talking about the bandits' deeds, they began to sob. Seeing that everyone was a bit saddened, Fang Hao continued, "Now, you are safe and free. I can give you a choice. If you have relatives or villages left, I will give you some food to return home. If you really have no one left, you can to my territory. There are no bandits there and you can live normally. Everyone looked at Fang Hao, not uttering a word. 2138. After a long silence, a girl stepped forward and softly asked, "Are you a city lord? If we go with you, what would we need to do? Would you make us do hard labor and beat us every day?" Fang Hao had some memory of this girl. When he first visited the dungeon, she was the one who hurled the most, and the nastiest insults at him. "I'm not a city lord, I'm a lord. I have many cities within my territory like Zeus City, Cruel City, and many others. You would have your own work, but certainly not hard labor, just like in your own villages, you need to do something to support yourselves," Fang Hao answered seriously. "Would you beat us? Why would I? Would you commit any mistakes?" Fang Hao counter-asked. The girl immediately shook her head, "I wouldn't make any mistakes." "Haha, you can choose whoever you like to marry, you can also choose whatever work you like, no one will force you to do anything in particular," Fang Hao continued. Upon hearing this, the girl extended her hand and said loudly, "I will go to your territory, I hope you will keep your word." Fang Hao nodded. "I want to go too." "Me too." One by one, they raised their hands, indicating their willingness to go with Fang Hao to his territory. The children, who were not very old, were also listening to the conversation. But their attention was still on the food in their hands. They listened to Fang Hao's words while eating, as if they were listening to a monologue while dining. Fang Hao stood on the chair, surveying the scene from above. All the women had raised their hands, not a single one willing to leave. In other words, whether they were women or children. Their village was gone, and all that was left were them.